Okay, good evening and welcome to the special meeting of council for Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. We're going to do the O Canada and then a moment of personal reflection, and I would like to dedicate the moment of personal reflection to Ashley Simpson. On behalf of the City of St. Catharines community, our thoughts are with the family of Ashley Simpson. The tragic ending to her disappearance after more than 5 years in BC is heartbreaking for those who loved and knew her. There is a GoFundMe that has been started by Ashley's Army, a group of friends and family, to help bring Ashley from BC and to put her to rest back home here in St. Catharines. And so I'm dedicating on behalf of our council the moment of personal reflection to Ashley. O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
All right, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Laurie Littleton, Councillor Littleton, for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. I had technical difficulties. We recognize that the lands on which we are gathering are home to many past, present, and future First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. St. Catharines is located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. The Niagara Territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This land acknowledgement is important because it reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people in our community and across Turtle Island. We offer our sincere gratitude and respect to the original and continued stewards of this land. This acknowledgement is our declaration of our collective responsibility to take action for a better world, one that is free from oppression, discrimination, and racism.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Littleton. And I just have a couple of brief remarks for the Mayor's report, as this is a special meeting of council. As we talk about transit tonight, I just want to give us some recognition to some significant efforts that are supporting a different kind of transportation, recreational transportation in our community. I want to thank the dedicated crew of the volunteers from the Niagara Trail Maintenance Association, who have helped construct an amazing mountain bike course in St. Catharines for the 2022 Canada Summer Games. They volunteered more than 900 collective hours to improve the trails and build the course at the 12 Mile Creek. I got to say, I think they took over a ton of garbage out of that area. A very proactive group, and they didn't take one tree down, which was great to hear. Not one tree was removed as part of the construction of the trail. This is just another example of how the games are bringing our community together and creating some legacy pieces that will be enjoyed by our community and the youth in our community for many years to come. The Let It Glow is taking light in downtown St. Catharines and in Port Dalhousie. The city's new holiday event that kicks off this Saturday. Interactive lighting displays will be lit up in the downtown core in Port Dalhousie from December 11th to January 9th. And I've seen some of the installations. They're absolutely beautiful. I want to thank the Downtown Association, the Port Dalhousie Beautification Works Committee, and the City of St. Catharines for partnering on bringing the holiday spirit to life in the downtown, and I believe Santa will be making a visit on a couple of those occasions. So visit lovestc.ca for more information, and looking forward to seeing everybody at the launch party on December 11th in downtown St. Catharines and December 18th in Port Dalhousie. The annual Great Holiday Food Drive takes place this Friday at Market Square. Bring non-perishable food or monetary donations throughout the day to Market Square. We're looking to fill the bus. It is great that we're talking about transit today because the Great Holiday Food Drive fills a lot of buses in our community for food that go to Community Care St. Catharines Thorold. Just want to thank our partners that are involved, 610 CKTB 97.7 Hits FM and Move 105.7, continuous supporters of the Great Holiday Food Drive that takes place in downtown St. Catharines. As well, I want to thank the Public Health and the YMCA for the great teamwork to arrange a pop-up clinic for child vaccinations on Monday. As you will recall, I was advocating for a clinic earlier than December 14th, and I want to thank those who made it all happen. I had an opportunity to attend the YMCA to check in on the vaccination, and I could tell you all the appointments were full. The parents were very grateful, and the children were coming out with smiles on their face knowing that they were protected in our community. And so there is a clinic that is scheduled December 14th to the 18th, and that's at the Penn Center, again in St. Catharines. It's by appointment only, so you can go to the Ontario site for a booking of vaccines, and you can choose your location. Just a reminder that there are other locations in the region, so if you're looking to get your child vaccinated earlier, please again check out the booking online portal by the province of Ontario, and you can select different sites, including I know Walmart is also doing vaccines for youth, in addition to our pharmacies in our community as well. It is with great pleasure and congratulations that we get to introduce a new team member to Team STC, someone who has been in the Deputy Chief's role for the St. Catharines Firefighter Services, and he has now been named the new leader of the St. Catharines Fire Services, and that's Mr. Dave Upper. Chief Dave Upper has a proven track record of leadership in our community, decades of service to the community. He has been a firefighter, he has been a captain, he has been a deputy chief, and now he has replaced the retiring Jeff McCormick, and he joined the service in 1991, and he is an amazing individual with a lot of leadership opportunities, and so a lot of connections to our community, connections to our firefighters, and to a lot of members in St. Catharines. And I just got to say, from the thanks or the congratulations that we put up on social media, the breadth of people who reached out and said congratulations to Dave really does speak to his impact on our overall community. So I'm just going to throw it over to, for the first time live on St. Catharines City Council, the Chief of the St. Catharines Fire Services, Chief Dave Upper. Over to you, Chief.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to serve in the capacity of your fire chief. I want to also thank everybody for their emails and reaching out and phone calls and the words of encouragement and congratulations. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Mayor, and Council in the next several years to move both our fire service and our city forward. I'm looking very forward as we get back out in the community and get our fire service back engaged with the community and working with our council. So I see great things coming ahead of us to continue the good work that retiring Chief McCormick had done and building on those. So I think we're in for some exciting times, and I thank council for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Thanks, Chief. Looking forward to your participation, and congratulations. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to CAO Oakes for an update on NAG Region Public Health, because there has been some letters of instruction And it is going to affect our recreation facilities, and it may create some concern. So I've asked the CAO to provide some context around what's going to start as of Friday, December 10th. CAO Oakes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start, and then I'm going to pass it over to Phil Christie to provide some more specifics. But you're correct. Earlier this week, the Medical Officer of Health for Niagara Region provided a letter of instruction relating specifically to recreation facilities in the region. They've seen the statistics showing that there are both outbreaks happening at various facilities, but they're also happening in vaccinated populations as well in the facilities. So the letter of instruction is intended to address some of the concerns that have been observed in recreation facilities, both publicly owned and also privately owned. So we have in fact had a few discussions, most recently this evening with the area CAOs along with Dr. Hergy, just to discuss some of the logistical issues that we are going to be facing as of Friday and moving into the course of December and into the new year, whether it be limitations on the dressing rooms being in the building before and after the games. There are challenges in all of the facilities, so some of those concerns have been brought forward to the region and public health on that. So we're working through that. But at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Christie just to provide some specifics in terms of how this is being communicated both to the users and hopefully how the users are then, the associations are relaying that information down to all of their parents and players. Phil?
Thanks, Dave, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The letter of instruction from the Medical Officer of Health was specific to recreation and fitness facilities, indoor recreation and fitness facilities, and provided 6 specific instructions related to how these facilities are accessed and used. While I'm proud to report that our current operating procedures have been working and working well, due to the partnership that we've been able to forge with our user groups, there are a few points within the letter of instruction which are a cause for concern for us, our staff, and for our user groups as well. Specifically, the new occupancy limits for dressing rooms basically drastically reduce the number of people that are able to use the room at any given time. And as CAO Oakes pointed out, those confined spaces are a cause for great concern for public health. And while we understand that, the newly imposed limits in terms of capacities within those rooms don't align with the fact that we don't have capacity limits overall for the facilities. So we are continuing to allow the same number of people, large numbers of people into our facilities, full hockey teams, coaches, and other folks. And now we're being told that only a set number of people can use those rooms. In addition to that, to the occupancy limits for those rooms, a newly imposed time limits are also a part of the letter of instruction, which are telling us that teams and groups and rental groups can access dressing rooms 15 minutes prior to their time on the ice, and they must vacate those spaces 15 minutes after their scheduled time on the ice is over. So those kinds of things create logistical pressures for us as staff. We simply don't have the resources to have people standing outside of our dressing rooms to count the number of people going in and out, and also ushering them out at the given at the appropriate time. We have met with our user groups, and they are while they are supportive of the efforts, the continued efforts of our staff and our volunteers at our facilities, they too are feeling the struggle, and we have asked them to help us in this regard. We've asked our user groups to provide assistance in terms of monitoring who goes in and out, and they have they've told us that they are going to do the best that they can to help us in this regard, and they understand that we're doing the best that we can as well. I'd also like to point out to council, it's mayor and council, that we have been working with our colleagues from across the region, so the recreation departments from the neighboring municipalities. We've been meeting on a regular basis. We've been discussing this, and one of our goals is to maintain consistency so that our user groups, as they travel throughout Niagara region, experience a similar sort of process when they go through not just arenas but other recreation facilities, so that we're not creating confusion and chaos in some cases, and long lineups and unnecessary negative experiences. So just wanted to provide you with that update. We are working through this. We are working together with our user groups, as I mentioned. And hopefully, as time progresses, we find more efficient and better ways to handle the situation that we're in. But we certainly understand the need for a change in the approach and how to use the facilities. But at this time, it does create some pressure points for us as we continue to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. And just in addition to what Phil had identified, on the call this evening, there will be some FAQs being provided by Public Health to all the municipalities, so we can help get the information out to the user groups. In addition, the recognition that this is a process that we have to work out, and logistics need to be sorted through. So there is some work that's being done and conversations that are being had with Public Health to allow for the transition, so we can ensure both public safety, our own employees' safety, but also and maintaining good flow within the buildings and having an experience that works. So conversation is continuing.
Okay, thank you to the CAO, and if you do get questions from members of the community, make sure you loop them in and forward them to the CAO so that they can be managed well by the staff, as this is going to be some confusing times for folks. But I do appreciate the effort of the staff and Public Health as well. With that, I'm going to look to the adoption of the agenda, and the clerk will read the following.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This evening's items that have been added to your SugarSync file, you have a report from Niagara Region, LNTC 5 to 2021 Niagara Transit Governance Phase 2 consultation results and triple majority initiation. You also have correspondence from the following: from Amy Romeo, Betty Lou Suter, John Suk, Office of the President of Niagara College, correspondence from Out Niagara, from Brock University's President, from Wilma Snipe, YMCA of Niagara, Don Sear, and Mike Lethby, who's the Executive Director of RAFT. And that's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the clerk. And I think council's had an opportunity to review them. Did all this correspondence just come in over the last day or two, or the last 4 days? And it's all related to transit. I hope council's had an opportunity to review the correspondence. So I'll have a motion to move the agenda. Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Harris. All in favor of the agenda? That's carried. And I don't think there's any conflicts of interest tonight.
I had a question about conflict of interest with the clerk, just because one of the letters is from my employer. Do I have to declare?
No.
I'm just always very cautious.
Yep, no, the clerks are shaking her head. Okay, any other conflicts? Okay, seeing none. We'll go to motion to move consent reports. There's nothing on the consent of report. That council approved the consent agenda, save and accept. So there is nothing on consent, right? No. We got the correspondence only. Okay, so I'll go to the clerk. Can we just do a show of hands on this one since it's correspondence? I need a mover and a seconder for the Councillor Littleton, Councillor Cisco. All in favor of the correspondence? That's carried. So we now move into the discussion report. And just a declaration to all presenters. Council chambers and all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, and the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants will be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but we always do so in a way that never undermines any person's abilities or dignity in our chambers. As a reminder to all presenters and guests, please keep your microphone turned off and camera turned off during until you are called to speak. So with that, we have 5.1, the Niagara Transit Governance, Creation of Consolidated Transit Commission in Niagara. Prior to discussing the report, CAO Oakes will provide opening remarks. Director of GO Implementation from the Niagara Region will be in attendance to answer any questions, and we will have delegations following the presentation. So we're going to go over to the CAO, and then we have about, I think, 11 delegations. And once the CAO is finished, I'll start to introduce the delegates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief given the nature and the number of delegations that we do have this evening. The report in front of you tonight is essentially the third step of a three-phase process following the reports from February and August of this year, CAO-007-2021 and CAO-124-2021, which essentially established the consultation process for this. However, the process didn't start there. It actually goes back to 2015 with the establishment of the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group, which was quickly followed in 2017 by the Memorandum of Understanding between the major transit providers in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Niagara Region, and Welland, and which essentially resulted in the Niagara Transit Governance Study, which was completed at the end of 2020. And that then set the framework to move forward with the process we're currently undertaking. The recommendations contained within the report in front of you tonight and the appendix that was attached from the regional report are a reflection of the work completed by the regional staff in consultation with the local municipal CAOs through the CAO Governance Steering Committee. The input over the previous two phases throughout this year was key to the associated financial model, as well as the revised strategies developed by the Governance Steering Committee. Significant change occurred from the initial governance study to the revised strategies as a direct result of this municipal feedback. Some examples of the revisions within the recommendations are the 7-year service guarantee, which is something that this council was particularly strong to have as a recommendation. In terms of governance, there is a mandatory governance review, which will be and will be embedded in the transfer agreements to be completed in advance and in conjunction with the 2026 municipal elections. So once there are 3 years of operation, there is a governance review to establish a permanent oversight commission for the Transit Commission. In addition to the concerns of the building, the land on which the St. Catharines Transit Terminal sits will remain and stay with the municipality as part of the agreement. The buildings and the assets are what transfer to the new commission. In addition, the concerns with relation to the service levels and existing service levels are reflected in the special regional levies that are introduced across all the municipalities, which effectively guarantee the service levels as they currently exist, but it also allows municipalities, and if demand increases and service levels are needed to be increased, the ability is there to do that over the course of the year. In terms of the next steps in the process, if this were to be approved and the triple majority is established over the next several weeks, the municipal transfer agreements will be negotiated based on predetermined term sheets such as the service guarantees, the minimum levels of service, the governance review, and all of the employee and personnel issues that have been identified both at our council level as well as our discussions we're having at a staff level between myself and the general manager of the Transit Commission. All of the specific and fine details will be part of the municipal transfer agreements, which will define and guarantee all of the pieces of that puzzle. So I leave it there. Staff are from my perspective, staff, the entire senior leadership team, we're all prepared to begin working with the Niagara Region on these municipal transfer agreements in an effort to establish the new commission that is based on principles laid out in the various reports, which have all led to the discussion that we're going to have tonight. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, CA Oakes. Also joining us on the meeting tonight, we have Regional Councillor Tim Rigby. We have Regional Councillor Kelly Edgar, Regional Councillor Brian Height, and Regional Councillor George Dart are the four. And they were part of the delegation, or they were part of the council at the region who has seen the presentation from the region, and they voted, well, we all voted 25-1 in favor of moving it forward. So with that, we do have a number of delegates. We're going to start with the president of Brock University, Rafi Rayhan, and I hope I got that correct, Rafi. And first of all, good to see you again, and want to turn over the mic to you. And you've got 5 minutes is the limit that we have here. So welcome. Looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. So first of all, just to clarify, I'm the president of the Brock University Students Union. So thank you for allowing the Brock University Students Union to speak at this special City Council meeting. We aim to enrich student lives through engaging events and programming while providing the necessary resources for empowered advocacy, public involvement, and active participation in internal governance. The BUSU U-Pass was first introduced in 2013 via campus-wide referendum. Students voted on this referendum because students wanted access to reliable and affordable transit. The referendum passed, and ever since then, students have been accessing transit across the region using their student cards. Brock University students contribute around $4.5 million a year in transit contracts. We also actively ask for feedback on transit on our social media pages, which have a following of almost 12,000. We hear from students who reside outside of St. Catharines and Thorold, which the council can see in the letter that we've provided. It takes a long time to get to campus with transfer routes that don't line up. Students have resorted to leaving for campus much earlier than they would like to in order to make class on time. Others will even have to Uber when they miss their transfers. In the 2020 Students on the Move report, 16% of Brock students indicated that it takes them over 45 minutes to get to campus via public transportation. An amalgamated transit system in Niagara with one centralized transit app would make traveling across the region seamless, allowing more students to live, work, and spend their money in the Niagara region. The Brock University Students Union is supportive of an amalgamated system being put in place and is committed to continuing working with transit providers to ensure our students can get around the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafe. Greatly appreciated having you here, and also the presentation that you had given at the region. Any questions of the presenter today? We got Councillor Miller.
Thanks, through the chair. Thanks, Rafe, and thanks, obviously, BUSU's support of St. Catharines Transit over the last few years. Just in addition to the U-Pass, BUSU and Niagara College also purchase additional service and specialized routes. Do you foresee that still being the case under a single transit system?
For sure. Could you specify what kind of special routes you're mentioning, just so I'm clear?
Like just the shuttle routes that like operate from downtown St. Catharines or operate between Niagara Falls and the campus?
For sure. No, our students, sorry, there's some feedback there. Our students definitely make use of those routes. And again, our concern is for those students that are residing outside of St. Catharines and Thorold as well, right, where it is difficult getting to campus from places outside St. Catharines and Thorold. So that's the specific demographic we're looking at right now when it comes to amalgamated transit, right? Because we do have other lines as well that go to downtown and back to campus. So I hope that provides some further clarification. Thanks.
No, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. That's it from me, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We're going to move on to the next one. We have Mr. Carl Dockstetter, Executive Director, Niagara Region Native Center. Mr. Dockstetter, welcome to St. Catharines Council, a special meeting on transit. Over to you.
Thanks for having me here. Dekakedos Nyangats, Wagasiliwaga Niwaga Tilota, Anyataga Niwaga Hunjota, Watsadat I'm going to follow, sorry, that means I'm Carl Dockstetter, the ED. I guess I've already been introduced. I'm going to follow with Rafe's example and try to not use the whole 5 minutes. I think it's important to acknowledge that the Niagara Regional Native Center headquarters is out here in Niagara on the Lake, where I am right now. But the highest concentration of people that identify as Indigenous, they do live in St. Catharines. However, there are a couple thousand self-identifying Indigenous people in Niagara Falls. There are over 1,000 self-identifying Indigenous people in Welland, but we also can't forget that there are 1,000 people that identify as Indigenous in Fort Erie, and in the other municipalities, they also combine for 1,000 Indigenous people. And so what happens is we just don't have the capacity to build 12 friendship centers. What we can do is expand our service here in Niagara on the Lake. We can expand our service in St. Catharines. Consolidated transit will allow people to get to our service hubs here in Niagara on the Lake, and as we look to expand in downtown St. Catharines. So I think that it's important that councils support this consolidated transit plan. The region is looking to add 130,000 new people, and as somebody that came back from Toronto to the Niagara region by choice, I did leave Toronto because Toronto was actually decreasing its overall investment in transit, and frankly, I didn't want to sit in gridlock traffic or have to navigate a transit system that was insufficient in the city. I think that now that I live here in Niagara, if we want to attract people to this area, then I think it's important that we offer those community assets. But more importantly, I want to echo the words of the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network that talks about how transit is a key tool for social mobility. It's no surprise to anybody in these chambers that Indigenous people are overrepresented in a number of categories, including a lack of transportation that's all too present in our First Nations, Métis and Inuit people that live in the Niagara region. So I think that having a consolidated transit is a key tool. I hope that this council has the vision to make sure that they support this plan, and also to be reminded that my membership here at the Niagara Regional Native Center, one of the reasons that they put me in place as the executive director is that it's important to have a voice that speaks to the environment. Passenger transportation makes up a significant portion of total greenhouse gas emissions in the world, and public transportation just doesn't have those same effects. The stats that I'm looking at are a little bit on the older side, but still hold true that the public transportation makes up about 54% of total greenhouse gas transportation. That's single passenger cars, and public transportation is responsible for less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to move people over to more public transit options. I would love when I lived in Niagara Falls and worked in Niagara Falls, and I could take a bus from my house to work. There's something nice about being able to read a book and to get to your place of employment and not have to worry about the other people driving on the roads. So I just think that we have great assets here. We have Niagara College in Welland and Niagara on the Lake. We have people that we help that access the courthouse in St. Catharines that are coming from all of the different areas in Niagara. There is world-class tourism in Niagara Falls that needs to be easier for people to get to. Brock is out there on the border of Thorold and St. Catharines there that again, more people need to be able to get to. And of course, our own beautiful Native Center out here in Niagara on the Lake, and with our hub currently on Welland Ave in St. Catharines. So I just think that there are a lot of reasons, and I want to throw the voice of the Niagara Regional Native Center firmly behind the plan in support of consolidated transit. And I hope the council does the right thing and joins Niagara Falls and Fort Erie in supporting this plan. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Dockstader, and very well said, very well stated. Any questions of the presenter? Okay, seeing no hands up. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you soon, Carl. We're going to move on now to Mr. Hugo Cheshire, and he is the Director of Policy and Government Relations, Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. And he's wearing a bow tie. He looks rather dapper. Thank you very much, Mayor Sunday. Yes, a wise man once told me if you want to impress council, wear a bow tie. That was you, by the way. So here I am. Yes, so I'm Hugo Cheshire. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Relations at the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, or the GNCC. Thanks very much for hearing our delegation today and for listening to the needs of Niagara's business community. Now, it's not a secret that Niagara Public Transit is not up to the needs of its residents or its employers. This is an old problem for Niagara. In 2002, the region produced a report called Niagara's Transportation Strategy, in which the need to integrate transit, among other things, was clearly identified. And despite that, it has not been done in the 2 decades that have elapsed since. Our 2015 Niagara Economic Summit identified transit as one of the main issues for Niagara. And Mayor Sendzik himself joined our panel on transit and infrastructure to highlight this need, and now, tonight, we finally have a chance to take action on this file. Our needs have only grown since then, but the system has not evolved.
We are now facing a nationwide labor shortage. Deloitte found recently that 30% of Canadian firms are experiencing labor shortages, and BDC reports that 64% of Canadian businesses are being limited in their growth by the lack of an available workforce. Pay more is not an option when 60% of small businesses are making less than their 2019 revenue. People without cars need jobs, and employers need workers, and both can testify to the difficulty of getting to work without a car. The pandemic has opened the door to remote work for some, but for many industries such as retail, manufacturing, and accommodation and food service, three of Niagara's largest industries by employment, that will never be an option. The labor shortage has many aspects and is affected by a lack of affordable childcare and housing, by skills mismatches, social policies, immigration policy, and more. Transit is a factor. It's not the only factor, but it is a significant one, particularly in the service sector where shortages are being acutely felt right now. Creating a public transit system that works for working people will help Niagara's businesses lead the recovery and create the economic growth we need to reach our potential as a region. We also face shortages in certain professions, such as the skilled trades and nursing. These shortages existed before the pandemic, but COVID has only made them worse. Our post-secondary institutions can train the workforce we need, but only if students can get to class. In this way, a better public transit system could help solve not just the labor shortages of today, but those of tomorrow as well. We see this proposed plan as the first step towards delivering the public transit system that Niagara needs. It will create the unified governance structure necessary for efficient delivery of services, for a single fare box, and for better access to funding from the provincial and federal governments that will allow us to expand our options in years to come. Evidence from around the world indicates that investment in transit gives solid returns in economic activity. In our letter to you, we cited studies that showed investments in public transit paying off at a 2-to-1 ratio, with agglomerating effects yielding returns of $1.5 million to $1.8 billion per year, depending on the size of the community. Public transit is not a drain on public coffers, but a driver of economic growth and prosperity. Your role as elected officials is not only to safeguard our tax dollars, but to see them invested wisely in projects and programs that will result in economic growth and increase the well-being of our citizens. Public transit is exactly such an investment, and we should make it. The proposed body would be collectively governed by all municipalities in Niagara, and each would pay according to the services they receive. This isn't an exercise in removing decision-making power from local government, but one in streamlining services so that they can link seamlessly and work harmoniously without duplication. Some of what I've said tonight will seem familiar because we have said it before. I say it again because it has taken 20 years to get to where we are now, and the same problems are still with us. I urge you not to add further delays to this lengthy process. The students who were riding the bus when the Niagara Transportation Strategy Report came out are now in their 40s. The people and the employers of Niagara do not want more referrals, studies, or consultations. They need a public transit system that works. You have a viable and effective plan before you, one that the GNCC has given its full endorsement. The consultations and the studies have been done and done well. Now we need to act. On behalf of Niagara's businesses, I ask you to vote yes to transit amalgamation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheshire. I appreciate that. Any questions of the presenter? Very well articulated from the business community's perspective. Okay, Councillor Miller.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Cheshire. Through the chair, do you, either for the GNCC's perspective or the business community's perspective, do you see the benefits of this in the intermunicipal transit routes or the local transit routes if you had to, I guess, prioritize one?
Actually, both. The intermunicipal transit aspect is important because there are just some links that are not available or not well synchronized right now. A good example of that is Niagara-on-the-Lake hospitality businesses would often like to tap into students, say from Niagara College, but because there's no real transit service that runs to Niagara-on-the-Lake, that's not an option unless those students have a car, for example. So the intermunicipal part is important. But even getting around within the city itself could also be improved, and more public transit lines means a more flexible workforce, especially if the hours that transit runs are longer or it's more frequent on those routes. And again, we see this plan as being a step towards creating a governance structure where those needs can be more easily addressed and synchronized across the entire region, rather than sort of piecing it together between various different transit commissions.
Thank you for that. And I guess kind of following on that, obviously, you know, we've had an integrated transit system for the last 10 years, and 99% of the routes are taking on that system currently in Niagara. So I guess my question is, if the system's been insufficient or the investment level hasn't been proper for the last decade, why do you or why does the business community trust that this change will ensure that the investment does need happens?
Well, so there's a few reasons. First of all, is that just having it decisions made under one body ensures that duplication of services does not take place. That was identified in the consultation process. That issues like transfers not syncing up with one another because they run between two different transit systems does not take place. And I'm also told, somewhat more informally as well, but I think it is true, that if you have a unified transit system with one budget and a larger budget, that's often more able to attract funding from the province or the federal government, and we're hoping that in years to come that might mean more funding for projects like rail or trolley buses, or just even the expansion of bus services that would increase the service at Niagara. But I think without having everything on one page to start with, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, the other issue as well, of course, is the GO train, and having an efficient service that works around that, and maximizing the economic potential of the GO train service is going to depend on an efficient feeder system that's well coordinated between all the cities, because GO is not going to come to every municipality in Niagara, but people who use the GO are going to want to go to every municipality in Niagara. So synchronizing that would be important as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that perspective. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Cheshire. Mr. Cheshire, my first question is in regard to affordability, and particularly around the fares. The city, the St. Catharines Transit Commission, has been able to offer a $3 fare. Is this important to the workers and the other folks who need to get around around Niagara, that we have affordable fares?
Yeah, thanks for the questions, Mr. Mayor. So yes, it is important, and it does affect the affordability of life in Niagara, which in turn affects the cost of living and wages, of course. And one of the issues that we have is that the wages have not been able to keep up with increase in the cost of living. And one factor behind that, which the Poverty Reduction Network and the Living Wage people have consistently identified, is in Niagara, you pretty much have to own a car in order to get around, to get to work. If you didn't have to do that, that would reduce your cost of living, which increases your standard of living without necessarily having to put more wages on employers, which in many cases are already very, very stretched, especially in the service sector. I don't think you need me to tell you it's not been a good couple of years if you're in accommodation and food service industry, for example. So there's not really any money left there. This is a way, I think, to increase people's standard of living.
Thank you. And the current system where the three major commissions work together to provide transit has been a very lean and efficient operation. Would you have concerns about centralizing and creating a larger bureaucracy? And you also mentioned it's not an exercise in removing decision-making or changing decision-making, but in reality, this is a significant, dramatic change where we're going to a 15-person body, and St. Catharines will have 3 members on that body. And a majority of the people who are going to make up are going to come from municipalities that either didn't have any kind of transit or have had very limited experience with transit. And we don't know what kind of commitment they will make. They're going to be in control, and we don't know how much they're going to be willing to invest. And we know a successful transit requires a lot of investment. So do you have concerns in those regards?
Thank you. It's a good question too, Mr. Mayor. So it's obviously reducing bureaucracy, reducing red tape is going to be an ongoing concern for the business community. Something that we've actually heard a lot from them is we don't understand why we have all these different transit commissions to run a public transit system that is smaller than the single system that Hamilton operates, for example. So I think that many businesses would see this as a way of reducing red tape, reducing overheads, and consolidating into one system. The call from business communities, members of the business community, to just amalgamate municipal services in general, streamline, share services, make things more efficient, has been very loud. And I think this is a good example of how Niagara can move forward, integrate and streamline, because a community that the size we are simply shouldn't have this many transit commissions, I don't think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Any other questions of Mr. Cheshire? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation from the GNCC. We now move on to Ms. Emily Kovacs, CEO of Niagara Multicultural Center here in St. Catharines. Welcome, Ms. Kovacs.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. You've heard from the Indigenous community, from students, from the business community. So tonight you're going to hear from me representing Niagara's newcomer community. Niagara Folkways Multicultural Center strongly supports the Linking Niagara Transit Committee proposed consolidated transit model. Linking the 12 municipalities would be a great benefit to immigrants and their ability to settle and thrive in the Niagara region. We know that reliable transportation is key for vulnerable members of our community so that they can access the services that improve their quality of life. We historically know that the lack of transportation has hindered the ability of immigrants to access settlement services, educational, employment, health, and social services. If you recall Carl talking about the fact that there's not a whole lot of friendship centers in all across Niagara, I can concur that in terms of the immigrant settlement services, we don't currently have one in Port Colborne or Pelham or any of the smaller municipalities, and we would love to have more of those services so that newcomers can access them in every lower municipality. As the population grows and job opportunities increase, it is imperative that there is a strong transit infrastructure in place so that individuals can access these opportunities. As our economy recovers from COVID-19, we need to have public transportation that is equitable and accessible to all areas of the region and able to get workers to their places of employment during their operational hours. Transportation is an immediate need for newcomers and refugees who are twice as likely as Canadian-born workers to commute by public transit. And that is by the International Observatory of Mayors Living Together in 2018 in a report called Welcome Halifax put together. We also know that there is a need for immigrants to help fill the local and regional employment gaps, as Hugo alluded to earlier, and that they can only happen with a user-friendly, regionally consolidated, accessible, and affordable transit model. Niagara Folkways Multicultural Center urges you to approve the consolidated transit model presented by the Linking Niagara Transit Committee, as it is crucial to improving the social determinants of health for the vulnerable members of our community and essential for the Niagara region's economic recovery and development. And for those of you who are not familiar with what social determinants of health are, the World Health Organization defines it that social determinants of health are the conditions in the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health functioning and quality of life outcomes and risks. Some of these are income and social protection, education, unemployment and job insecurity, working life conditions, food insecurity, housing, basic amenities and the environment, early childhood development, social inclusion and non-discrimination, structural conflict, and access to affordable health services and decent quality. And of course, all of these social determinants are underlined by transportation. So I just wanted to finally conclude my remarks by saying that there are lots of good examples and best practice examples that exist in other regions and municipalities where this issue has been already solved. And we can certainly look at Metrolinx's a great example of their community engagement process in areas of the GTA where they actually embedded their community engagement process. They embedded equity into their community engagement process. So they particularly made priority for equity deserving communities to be part of the actual building of the new transit system. So I urge council to think of not only endorsing this, but in every step of the way to build equity into your decision-making process, whether that's thinking about who you hire to build a transit system for you, who you hire to drive your buses, and who you hire to make sure that there's an improved process for this. Thank you very much. That is my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kovacs. Greatly appreciate it, and thank you for bringing the voice of newcomers to our community to the table. I think it's a voice that often gets overlooked when we're making decisions around council. And so I want to thank you for your leadership. Any questions of the presenter? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. We're now going to move on to Betty Lou Suter, CEO of Community Care St. Catharines and Thorold. And I'll call on Betty Lou, and everyone I believe is very familiar with Betty Lou as we're doing the Great Holiday Food Drive on Friday. Just a quick plug before she jumps on.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Sanzik and members of council and city staff. I am Betty Lou Suter, the CEO of Community Care St. Catharines and Thorold, which, as you know, has been in our community since 1919. Sorry, need to start my video. I apologize. Okay. Am I there?
Yep, yeah.
Okay, as you know, our main operations are in St. Catharines and Thorold, but many of our clients are accessing specialized programs. Youth programs are all across the region from Fort Erie to Grimsby. We work in partnerships with government, other agencies, and community organizations across Niagara to deliver the 20 programs and supports that we serve our clients. Service delivery in our sector has moved towards partnership and integration because we recognize that people living and traveling across Niagara who access our programs deserve the same level of service no matter where they live. In our sector, we understand the government has a role in investing in the necessary infrastructure to help provide and help people move from poverty and towards a better life. Good public transit investments are critical because many of the thousands of individuals we serve do not have access to a vehicle and rely on transit to get around the community. As you know, our clients live below the poverty line, and many live in areas where transit is poor or non-existent. When needing to travel around the region under the current transit systems, it's a struggle and a hardship to navigate different transit systems, schedules, routes, and fares just to make it to a job interview, a doctor's or appointment in another city. In a recent Harvard study, commute times were identified as the single strongest factor in the odds of escaping poverty. The longer a commute time, the worse the chances of a low-income family was of escaping poverty. I think my colleagues have identified before me access to housing, employment, education, and healthcare are all dictated by transportation. That's why we believe that the plan before you this evening is so important. I see the benefits of integration and believe that a well-funded regionalized transit system would be a major step towards social and economic prosperity for Niagara residents, especially those who rely on our services. One system will be easier to navigate, especially for the seniors, youth, people entrenched in poverty, and people with cognitive impairments. One system will make life more affordable because living in an area with good transit can free up thousands of dollars in a household budget that would otherwise go to a car ownership. It would allow people without cars to get jobs. It can open up a whole new world of opportunity. The St. Catharines Transit Commission, the Amalgamated Transit Union Operators, the City of St. Catharines, and many of you here today have been strong supporters and partners of agencies like Community Care, for which we're very grateful. And I thank you for your ongoing support. The work we do together is all about people. It's the reason why we are here today, to put people in the center of our shared work, to find ways to improve quality of life, to create better and more just systems to help them climb out of poverty. I'm grateful to be able to lend my voice to this discussion. Over my career, I've learned many things about my community. A community is only as strong as its weakest link. Collaboration and change can sometimes be challenging, but when we work together and speak with one voice, it's amazing what can be accomplished. I have learned that to move forward, we need to embrace future opportunities with unity and strength of purpose. But I've also learned that it's about the greater good for all, and I firmly believe that this endorsement is about the greater good for all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Betty Lou. Any questions of the presenter? Betty Lou, I have one because it's a bit tangential in terms of your role in healthcare. You've been the chair of Niagara Health, and you're on the board of the Hotel du Shaver. We have had correspondence from both Niagara Health and the Hotel du Shaver in support of the linkages that are needed. From your perspective, with your experience as a community member of the boards, how important is this decision tonight?
Well, I think it's extremely important, Mayor Senzak. I think that we all know, and I think we've all identified that access to the appropriate health care at the right time is critical. And we have to have that fluidity that we can move from one area that's going to provide us with the health supports that we need to the other as seamlessly as possible. So from the perspective of the work that I have done in the healthcare sector, it is extremely important, and it's something that we have talked about around the table for many, many years.
Thank you, Betty Lou. Seeing no other further questions, I want to thank you for your presentation, and we're going to move on to the next speaker. It's Michaela, I'm going to say this, Michaelina and Netos. I apologize. Miss Netos, if you can let me know how to say your first name.
Michaelina.
Michaelina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Michaelina. So, Michaelina, thank you for joining us today, and it's over to you for your presentation.
Here today. So my name is Michaela. I am a math at Brown University, and I would just like for giving a local Niagara resident the time to speak. Right in economic and social development challenges. About 64% global consumption, 7% of all energy use, 3% of the world's energy-related carbon dioxide. In the post-COVID era, implementing changes.
Michaelina, I'm just going to put you on hold for a second because it keeps crackling. There's a crackle in the voice is breaking. Yeah. So let's do a test again. If you want to just.
Okay. Does it sound better now? Sorry.
It could have been your hair on the earpods.
Okay. Thank you. Rethinking, revamping the post by
Nope.
structure.
Okay, so here what you can do: take the earbuds out and see if you can, because sometimes. Okay, now I call on Sam Jemison, the president of Niagara College Administrative Council. She's here to present the position from NCSAC. And welcome, and looking forward to your presentation, Sam.
Mr. Mayor, just confirming I can be heard.
Okay, now we don't hear.
Hello.
Okay, we'll just wait, Sam. Can't hear you. Okay, you're live, Sam. Live from City Council, Sam Jemison, the NSAC president from Niagara College.
Thank you so much. So just to confirm, I can be heard now.
Yes, you can. Loud and clear.
All right, so thank you so much, everybody, for waiting for me through the technical difficulties and for having me here to speak to you all today. So yes, my name is Sam. I am the elected representative of more than 9,000 Niagara College students. And I am here today to speak in strong support of an integrated regional transit system for Niagara. As well, I did want to note, even though I am speaking today solely as the representative of NCSAC, or the student union on campus at Niagara College, you will have noticed a letter penned jointly by NCSAC and Niagara College that should have been circulated to you before this meeting, showing our joint support for an integrated transit system. Seamless transit across Niagara municipal lines provides both student and non-student riders with not only an increased quality of life, but also the ability to actively participate in Niagara's economy. A student living in Welland or Niagara Falls suffering from the lack of time and mobility the current transit system fails to provide will likely not consider having a part-time job in St. Catharines, will likely not head to Penn Centre or surrounding shops to support those businesses, and will likely not be able to benefit from or contribute to the St. Catharines economy or community. A transit system that links Niagara's municipalities is crucial for our students to get to class, to work, and to co-op placements throughout the region. And it provides employers, many of whom are dealing with a shortage of workers, with a workforce that is more mobile, and it creates more options and opportunities for those in Niagara who are looking for work. Employers have been clear about the challenges in finding workers, and transit is a major hurdle. This has already been amplified by chambers of commerce and other influential voices. A consolidated, seamless transit system is needed to match employees with the employers who need them, regardless of municipal lines. We want to keep students here in Niagara after graduation, to fill jobs and drive growth and prosperity in our community. Without a better transit system, we'll drive them out of Niagara, to fill jobs and drive growth in other communities. With an approval from St. Catharines Council tonight, the Niagara College Student Administrative Council is excited to see Niagara Region Transit move closer to a consolidated transit system that is years overdue and a system that young people can buy into. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Sam. Got Kevin, Councillor Townsend, and Councillor Miller. Councillor Townsend, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sam, for your presentation tonight. I know you said there's about 9,000 students now at Niagara College. Is it fair to say that about 3,000 of those students would be international students coming to study at Niagara?
Yes, so I believe the international population in recent years, of course, changing with COVID, has bounced between 33 to 44% of the Niagara College population.
And would you know offhand, through the mayor, how many of those students that do come internationally rely on the public transit? Just, I know it's a tough question to answer, but in all honesty, how many of them come with a driver's license and a vehicle to get around?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. I would say most. I cannot speak from a numbers side. That is not something I've seen statistics on. However, from direct interactions with our international department, international students, and personal friends that I had made at Niagara College, it is it's a very large part of the population. I would say comfortably 90%. Again, this is my own personal take on it from what I've seen, so I do want to make that clear.
And through the mayor, Niagara College is a big hospitality school. As we know, they have the wine programming, they have the chef's culinary program there as well, which are they're internationally known programs that I know students from around the world do come. I do work with some of them out in Niagara-on-the-Lake myself. How many of them do they end up doing a co-op? And a lot of them do stay, I would say, in Niagara-on-the-Lake and work at the hotels and work in places like Jordan Station as well, or in Beamsville on the Beamsville bench. Is that kind of the expectation with these programs?
So again, through Ms. Mayor, yes, largely. Niagara College also focuses very, very heavily on co-ops. So not only do they need transit to get to these jobs when they do graduate for part-time jobs during their studies, but they're co-ops in order to graduate and become qualified individuals in these sectors in a very, very big hospitality type of region. Yes, they very, very heavily rely on the transit system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Miller.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for the presentation. Proud to say I'm an Niagara College alumni myself. Go Knights. I guess my question is, generally speaking, how do students learn how to use or interact with the systems? As it's been noted, there's a few different ones. So I guess generally speaking, how does a student learn how to get from point A to point B in Niagara?
So I would say it's incredibly hard to comment on that, of course, because we have our domestic students that learn through high school, generally through guidance counselors, through teachers, through parents, through siblings oftentimes, and kind of stumble their way through it. A lot of it is a lot of online searching. And I cannot tell you, I think 10% of my job when I am on campus is dedicated to helping students find the transit route that they need to take, because it can be quite confusing. So how they learn, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways, I'm sure, depending on where you're from, what websites you have to use. But I will say there's a heavy reliance when students can't figure it out quickly enough to go to Uber or other services, which are difficult to afford. So can I comment on it directly? No, I cannot. I can only say that it is difficult to learn, and it is something I am still learning myself in order to support students.
And I guess if we, presumably one system would be easier as a one-stop shop. Would you have a recommendation for whether we should be driving students and all users to a website, to an app, to Google Maps, or in order to learn how to get around?
I would say, again, through the mayor, I would say definitely an app would probably be the most accessible, at least at a student level. That would be my guess. Again, I don't have the numbers to back anything on what has statistically been the most productive in different regions, but I would say looking to other regions for what has worked best would be the best. And again, one system is the go-to. As well, when it comes to Google Maps, I know that they will kind of auto-update or be updated to reflect them. So I think that a reliance on that would also be heavily helpful because I know that that is another way people learn. They will use Google Maps from A to B and look for the suggested transit routes to take. So I think a reliance on Google Maps as well, but definitely a transit app, one hub that people can go to would be very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Seeing no other further questions, I just have a question for Sam about the competitiveness of getting or choosing a college. And can you touch on the Niagara College being one of the top colleges in the country, and yet the struggles to attract the students based on transit?
Yeah, so this is something that we talked about thoroughly when we to our, I'll say, discussions around how we should present to regional council, where I presented jointly with Sean Kennedy, the president of Niagara College, and Dorita, who is head of recruitment at Niagara College, or works very closely, I should say, with recruitment at Niagara College, has made it quite clear it is very, very difficult to recruit students to Niagara, because whether it is through word of mouth of other students, or whether it's direct questions that we can't lie to the face of a student when we are asked. If we are asked about transit, we cannot say that we have a transit system a student can rely on to get to class. We cannot say that they can have a part-time job to pay off their tuition while they're in Niagara, because they will likely, if they are taking the transit system, not have time to go to a part-time job. So it is very much so a hurdle for recruitment for Niagara College. I, of course, can't speak to Brock, but I imagine there there might be some similarities there, but it's very, very much so a hurdle that we hope to overcome with a regionalized transit system.
All right, thank you very much for that. Very much appreciate the presentation, and looking forward to continue to working with Niagara College. I now call on Caleb Ratzlaff to present. Mr. Caleb Ratzlaff will be presenting to council, and then I think we'll go back to Mechalina. Caleb, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks a lot. Thanks for letting me speak, council. I just have two quick remarks, and I wanted to preface them though by saying that uploading governance to the region doesn't guarantee a more robust transit system. It requires advocates, transit advocates, to advocate for money to be spent on transit. And so I hope that when you vote yes to upload governance to the region, that you'll also be committed to being those advocates. I work at a church in St. Catharines on Queenston Street, Westview Christian Fellowship. We run a women's center, Westview Center for Women. The vast majority of women who participate at that center rely on transit. One of my friends from the center, she was on a wait list for regional housing for years. She finally got placed in a house in Niagara Falls, so she had to move from Queenston Street to Niagara Falls. She had to leave, so we celebrated that. It was really good for her, but of course she had to leave her support system to do that. She's recently been diagnosed with cancer, and so she spends a lot of time commuting to the Niagara Falls Hospital and the hospital in St. Catharines. I think it makes sense to bring those silos of transit together to the regional level. You know, if you're going to have housing at the regional level, and if you're going to have centralized health services that require people to move around the region, then I think this is a good step, so long as it's followed up with advocates who are willing to advocate for money to be spent on our transit system. The second thing that I wanted to say was I bought a house in St. Catharines in Midtown because I couldn't afford one in the North End. I couldn't afford a house and two cars at the time. Many of my peers today don't have even that option because housing's become unattainable. And I don't want to imagine what it's going to be like for my kids. There aren't a lot of tools at the city or region level that I think can affect a real estate market that's gone global. But investing in transit is one thing that we can do. My work with Queenston Neighbours and Fitzgerald Neighbours, affordable housing is one of the things that we hear the most anxiety around. And we, of course, want to advocate for active transportation. And a robust transit system that connects residents to the rest of the region, I think, is a necessary step in any solution that is out there to address affordable housing. We need transit routes where we can build affordable housing along so that, like you've heard, people can be connected to their jobs, people can be connected to their support bases, and people can get to the hospital when they need to. So those are my 3 points. And I do hope that those of you who vote yes, I hope you all vote yes to upgrade or upload governance to the region. But when you do, know that we also need commitment for transit advocates. And I run a small group called Niagara Glow Riders. We do night rides, and we try to bring attention to the need for active transportation in St. Catharines. So, you know, if you want to join us, feel free. We're not meeting during the winter, but we meet throughout the year. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Caleb, and thank you for the perspective. We got Councillor Williamson. Just got to unmute, Councillor.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ratzlaff. I think you hit on something really important here. Some have described it as taking a leap of faith, and my concern is turning over control to 15 people. We've seen the commitment that we've made here in St. Catharines to transit to keep fares low and to try and expand and provide as good a services that we can within the constraints that we have. But we don't, to me, it's a big question mark. the rural and small town politicians who will end up being in control. And of course, you've been around, we're always one election away from a cabal or something being in charge. And
Counselor, can you get to the question instead of providing an opinion at this point?
This is an important issue, Mr. Mayor, and I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about this change. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, or the question is, I mean, do you have faith that the people who will be in charge of the new system are going to invest in it appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem that you identify is no different, or isn't significantly different than the problem that we currently have, right? There could be people around the table here who don't agree with investing heavily in transit, and the same thing can happen at the regional level. The rural piece, I think, is important, but yeah, I guess I hope there's enough advocates to convince folks otherwise.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ratzlaff. Thank you for your presentation. You hit the nail on the head where you said advocacy. You need to continue to advocate for provincial and federal funding to ensure that the system gets the funding it needs in order to operate and be functioning. Is that kind of what you meant by continuing to advocate? Is, you know, we do have a responsibility still from the municipality of, you know, the region and the city of St. Catharines to advocate for that funding. Is that the direction that you meant when you mentioned advocate?
Well, yeah, that, and, you know, holding the region accountable to creating a robust transit system. Yeah.
Okay. No, I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, and sorry, Caleb, for the grilling as a private citizen, but just I appreciate you bringing up certainly the point that we should be focused on the investment and less on the governance, and I think that's what most people are talking about improving transit. And the other point you brought up around housing, I was just curious, one of the big selling features of this is possibly attracting increased GO Transit service, which could have a negative impact on housing, increased housing values. Is that something you'd be concerned about, just in regards to that housing piece?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's hard to know, you know, what you can do to combat the forces of gentrification. But, you know, transit is important for creating affordable housing. You know, we can't afford to continue building urban sprawl that relies on unsustainable infrastructure. But, you know, the other point that I think of with that question, Greg, is we're not going to see the benefits of this vote in this term or next term, or maybe even the term after that, right? So it's going to take courageous politicians to advocate for that transit system, because, you know, if you don't see it in your term, it's a harder thing to do. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that's a very good point, that whatever we do tonight, whatever happens during the triple majority, it is very early in this process. It's going to roll out over decades, really. So thanks, Caleb.
Thank you very much, Caleb. I don't see any more questions, so thank you for your presentation and the great work that you're doing at Westview Center for Women and the fellowship there. And we're going to try and go back to Mechalina Netos, and she's not on yet. Oh, there, Mechalina's there.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There you are.
Okay now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So sorry about the technical.
Do not apologize. It's great. It's great to have you back.
Thank you so much. Okay. I will just jump right back in. So transport is at the center of many economic and social development challenges, accounting for about 64% of global oil consumption, 27% of all energy use, and 23% of the world's energy-related carbon dioxide emissions. Rethinking and revamping transit in the post-COVID era by implementing structural changes would go a long way toward reinforcing some of the positive impacts on emissions levels and air quality. Public transit can make or break a community based on access and equity. Public transit directly affects access to different opportunities based on factors such as riders' neighborhoods, income levels, and now, during the pandemic, whether they can work remotely. Unlike other types of transportation, such as by car, public transport is far more affordable. Niagara Adapts is an amazing initiative that supports collaboration from the various municipalities in Niagara on issues that pertain to us all, like transit. And collaboration is vital to a healthy environment, community, and economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has burdened the economies, the planet, and most importantly, the people. I truly believe there's no better time to come together on such an important issue. A regional transportation system will support our economy by creating more jobs and increasing opportunities for residents to work all over the region. Additionally, the regional transportation system may even increase tourism because visitors could see even more of the region. Imagine if the annual over 13 million tourists to Niagara Falls could see what else our region has to offer. Further, the transit system will reduce carbon emissions because less people will be forced to buy a car, lessening the burden of traffic and making active transportation more appealing. Accordingly, this regional transit system aligns with Canada's Healthy Economy and Healthy Environment Plan. Finally, the plan will support the social structure of our region by connecting our people, making it easier for residents to visit friends and family, especially if they don't have access to a car or want to have a glass of Niagara wine during their night out. In a time that is so very divided, it is important to move towards reconnecting ourselves with each other and our planet. Additionally, to support the passing of this transit system, I have reviewed some of the city plans of Welland and St. Catharines, and majority of them are in favor of a healthy and safe environment. And I believe that a regional transit system supports both of those pillars. For example, Welland's urban design guidelines states, one of the most prevalent impacts of the built environment is the creation of the urban heat island effect. Particularly in the summer months, the effects of the heat island can increase temperatures by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. And research shows that a successful transportation system can reduce emissions. A study by Colby in 2019 states energy-efficient public transportation leads to the highest mitigation of summer heat island intensity and carbon dioxide levels. And with our warming, delicate planet, there's no better time to act than now. Before I close my statement, I want to stress the importance of a fair cost for transportation. Implementing this regional transit system would have many benefits. However, if the general public cannot afford it, it will not be used, and thus it would end up being a waste of money overall. Additionally, the region should aim to move towards an electrified fleet as soon as possible, as that is the direction our society is moving. This can be seen through large corporations like Canada Post moving to electrify their entire fleet by 2030. I and all the other residents in our beautiful region trust you all to make the right decision for us now and for the many generations to hopefully come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Netos, and it was great to have your presentation, get you back on the docket, and great to hear the environmental perspective that you bring. It's an important voice that I think often gets lost in the efforts that we're trying to do here. Any questions of the presenter? Okay, seeing no questions, thank you very much. We're going to go on now to Ms. Rachel Braithwaite, Executive Director of the St. Catharines Downtown Association. Ms. Braithwaite, great to see you.
Good evening. Nice to see you as well, and thank you for your time today. I am very impressed with the other presenters, so you get a shorter version of my presentation because I clearly don't need to touch on things like inclusivity, accessibility, and environmentally friendly reasons. So instead, I am going to focus more on the business side of things and actually keep my real hat on for once. So I am here to express the St. Catharines Downtown Association support for the proposed consolidated transit model recently supported by the Niagara region. The St. Catharines Downtown Association represents over 500 small business and commercial property owners in the downtown core. We recognize the importance and value of this proposal, which would link all of Niagara's communities and contribute to economic prosperity. creating better access to jobs and services, generating new markets for businesses, and more. I'm going to touch on just a few little things that really will impact the local economy. So for example, it will provide more support to our small businesses. So we've already talked about the jobs perspective. It will really allow our small businesses who are currently not able to open their full-time hours because they cannot get staff to attract more staff. It will also allow them to attract more customers. So currently, a lot of them are dependent upon people driving to their businesses. But if we allow them to bus to their businesses from across the region, that will increase their revenue and again, increase our economic prosperity. It will also provide support for our entertainment venues. We are very blessed to have a number of state-of-the-art entertainment venues in the downtown St. Catharines, but unfortunately, almost all of the patrons are forced to drive to the venues. With a consolidated transit model, it will allow these venues to not only expand their reach, but also allow for more flexibility for the patrons to enjoy our restaurants and, again, increase our economic prosperity. One thing we often hear is parking. COVID has given me a little bit of a break from the parking issues that we often hear downtown and lack thereof. And it's a challenge that a lot of our members hear from their patrons is lack of parking downtown, even though there's 2,300 municipally owned parking spots alone in the downtown core. However, the perception is still that parking is a challenge. By creating a consolidated transit model, it will reduce the dependency on parking visitors to the downtown St. Catharines area will have. It will also mean that there's more parking available for when we intensify. We know it's coming. We've already know that there's a 30-story building approved and an 18-story in the process of being built. So we know intensification downtown is coming. It's the only way for us to increase our residential. But where will those people park? We need to give them other viable options to get jobs in our Niagara region and also to work across the Niagara region. It will also increase, as has been mentioned previously, inclusivity across the region. I can give you numerous examples of, for example, we had a pie festival at Market Square where a number of amazing councillors were pied in the face. Thank you, Councillor Sorrento and Councillor Cisco. But we had volunteers working that event that were part of Niagara College and lived in Niagara Falls. And it took them an hour to commute one way to volunteer at that event to help support the community. That's dedication, but it's not a reward on their part. We also have an intern that's looking to start with us in the new year, which we're really excited about, that lives in the Niagara Falls area as well and goes to Niagara on the Lake for college, Niagara College. She would take it an hour as well to commute to our offices. As such, she's requested to work from home. So we're missing out on bringing people to our downtown, getting lunch in our small businesses, and supporting our local economy because of the commute that is currently in place. We strongly encourage the City of St. Catharines to support a consolidated transit plan. And thank you for your guidance and leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Braithwaite. Thank you for your presentation. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Braithwaite, and certainly I appreciate that a lot of the downtown businesses have an interest in people coming from out of town, but I think you're one of the only presenters that represents a pretty specifically St. Catharines stakeholder group. Do you have I guess, an assessment of local transit currently in St. Catharines and how the system's working for the downtown?
That's a good question. I will say it's good for those that are local and know how to use it, which is typically a certain customer base. The majority of people that come downtown do have cars, and they have a car for a reason, and that's because our transit system is currently not adequate. I think we really need to push, as has previously been mentioned, for a much more robust and accessible and inclusive transit system that allows not just younger people to use it or people that are forced to use it, but it's used by choice. I don't currently see that being the system. And I feel that if we have that more robust system, we will see an increased usership. Currently, we don't see huge numbers of our small business owners and workers who are reliant upon transit because it's not reliable. They will be late to their jobs, which makes their businesses run badly. So they unfortunately are forced to have a car.
Okay, thank you, and I definitely appreciate your insight there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any other questions of the presenter? I just want to thank Ms. Braithwaite for her leadership Downtown Association. I do also know that we've got correspondence from the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre regarding the importance of this, and also in discussions with Mr. Dixon from Meridian Centre, the importance of bringing people from outside of our community into two very well-established amenities that would rely on increased traffic that would benefit our downtown, from Welland, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, to come see the Ice Dogs or concert at Meridian Centre, or go to the concerts and performances at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. So I think you've wrapped it up very well, Ms. Braithwaite, on the importance of what this means for our own city assets as well. Thank you very much for your presentation. I now turn it over to Brad Clark, Director of Student Life and Community Experience, Brock University. Mr. Clark, you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. In my role as Director of Student Life and Success on campus, I have many different connection points with the student experience, both on campus, but also in St. Catharines and throughout the Niagara region. And so thank you for the opportunity to come and to speak with you this evening on behalf of Brock University in support of a consolidated regional transit system. I'll share several points where the university feels that this approach is a very positive one moving forward. As I've noted, Brock supports improved intramunicipal transit service for our students. Brock expects to surpass 20,000 students in the coming years, meaning more students will be traveling to and from campus from different parts of Niagara every day. An interconnected transit helps ensure that our campus is accessible to all students, regardless of background or socioeconomic status. Has been mentioned, that's a significant barrier at present. Many students live, work, and are involved in activities all throughout different parts of the Niagara region. And better transit service provides greater options, flexibility, and choice for our students to travel to campus from all areas throughout the region. It also helps students who commute to Brock from outside the GTA by providing them greater means to get around once they arrive here in the region. For instance, students undertake co-op placements or other co-curricular activities such as volunteering in local community organizations, that has been noted already this evening. Moving from your residence to a volunteer experience that's not, immediately adjacent without a car is a very difficult proposition, and often costs the volunteers significant resources and time and money to do that good service work. Better intermunicipal transit options also reduce barriers that students may face when considering opportunities, and ensures that Brock students are able to more fully engage and contribute to the broader Niagara community. Again, 19,000 plus students at present and growing is a tremendous resource and asset to the region, and we want to be able to share our students' skills and energy in all aspects across St. Catharines and the broader Niagara region as well. And also, I think it should be noted that interconnected transit also has the potential to more evenly distribute student housing across the region, which again has the potential to reduce pressures on the communities that are closest to our campus at present. Also, transit is a more affordable choice for students. So with fuel prices rising, a reliable intermunicipal transit helps provide another affordable option for students to move about, to attend class and to contribute to the region in other ways as well. And this supports greater equity and inclusion by reducing barriers for students to attend Brock and other and Niagara College as well. Our institution is committed to environmental sustainability, and we've in the past taken steps to reduce our own footprint. Again, an interconnected transit system provides options that allow students to commute by public transit rather than drive, and that reduces demand on our roads and reduces vehicle emissions as well. And next, regional transit will help support and position the region to be able to scale up and meet the needs of our growing population and job market. Again, there's been numerous comments to this effect already this evening. It supports expansion and connectivity of GO Transit service, It drives tourism by connecting students and all people to destinations, activities across the region. And it certainly could utilize innovative methods to service communities like on-demand transit. In many ways, better intermunicipal transit is a triple win for our students, for the Niagara region, and also for the environment. And while I've focused my comments today on the student experience and spoken in support of it in that context, I think many of these points translate to the broader Brock community as well, to faculty, to staff, to those from across the region who use our campus as a community resource and take advantage of the many programs and services that we have here. So it really, to me, is so exciting to hear that we have come to this point. An earlier presenter commented on the transit studies that were done in the late 90s and early 2000s. I was a student at Brock at that time and a student leader as well, and I can remember campaigning on the need for better transit across the region. To think, I'm now in my 40s, so that 20 years has passed, and we're talking about it becoming a reality today, and to think that my kids, as they will come to make their mark on the region, will be able to benefit from connectivity and transit across the region. Again, it's something that I think is a huge benefit, a huge opportunity, and I'm very, very hopeful that Council sees their way to making this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And also thank you for your work that you do with student life and the community and the intersection between those two. You do a great job. Very well presented. And 20 years ago, you probably may have had more hair and yeah, exactly. And 20 years on, we're hopefully we'll see what the decision that we can make tonight, but hopefully we'll move in the right direction. So keep up the great work. Any questions of Mr. Clark? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, and certainly has been noted, hopefully we'll still be talking about better transit for the next 20 years as we continue to advocate. And I guess on that note, I'm sure you could talk about this at length, but just in brief, broad strokes, how do you see student life changing in the coming years in terms of the size of Brock, where students are going to be living, and if you're moving more to online learning?
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, just the last year and a half, 2 years has shown us that the student experience, changes dynamically in many ways, some that we don't anticipate. We know for certain, though, that students value the in-person experience. They value the ability to connect with each other and to connect with their place. In this case, St. Catharines, Thorold, and Niagara, and that when they have those connection points, all spheres are enriched. They benefit from the recreational opportunities and the social opportunities. They benefit the region in terms of volunteer contributions and work integrated learning and placements and all of those sorts of things that help them to see that Niagara is such a wonderful place beyond just the construct of our campus. And so I think more than anything, making it easier for students to move about the region and to take advantage of this wonderful place likely translates into what I experienced, which was seeing that Niagara is a really special place to be, and wanting to remain here after graduation and to form a life here that contributes back. So again, I think we've talked about the advantages to recruitment. I think it's also a significant advantage when it comes to retaining students and graduates, that important talent base for the region. Again, thinking not just 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. Like I said, I've been now here more than 20 and know that it was a fantastic decision. I think more students will see that as they're able to move around the region more freely and to benefit and contribute to the wonderful thing that we're building here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that insight and expertise on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. All right, thank you, Brad. Appreciate the conversation, and we're going to move now into the final speaker, Miss Elizabeth Zimmerman, Executive Director, YWCA Niagara. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mayor Zenzik and Council. You've heard a lot of viewpoints this evening, and I think it's been incredible just to listen to everybody's what they've had to say. So my name is, as Mayor Zenzik has said, I'm the Executive Director for the YWCA, and we are an organization that supports women, men, and children who are facing the realities of homelessness and poverty. We provide support through homeless shelters and transitional housing, as well as various skill development programs. We see firsthand the consequences of a transit system that does not serve the vulnerable in our community. For the YWCA, this is an issue of social equity, of building inclusive communities that are responsible and responsive to all of its members. As the Executive Director of the YWCA, an organization that works with women living in poverty, we understand the importance of an integrated transit system. We see families and women trying to navigate a disjointed, cumbersome system to travel around the region, whether it is to access employment, childcare, or any other services. We see the consequences of a system that currently creates many barriers for women to be able to move forward in their lives. The majority of individuals who access our shelters and transitional housing programs do not have vehicles, or do they necessarily have access to someone willing to drive them around the region, so they are reliant on the transit system. As an organization that provides services across the region, we hear the stories of women not being able to take their children to appointments, access employment, or access other needed services. We also hear stories of it taking a full day to be able to go to a doctor's appointment because of the time it takes to navigate the current transit system between multiple transit providers, different fee structures, and the timing of transfers. These are all clear indicators of how the current system is not serving our community. The current housing crisis has exacerbated this further as women and families look for housing they can afford. They are finding themselves moving out of their home communities to other areas of the region. This makes access to their supports, employment, and other services near impossible to maintain. An integrated transit system that is responsive to the needs of the community will go a long way to reducing the impact of these moves. Having an integrated system will create the opportunity for the women and families we serve to access job options outside of their neighborhood without disrupting their social supports and their families' lives. They will be to access the services they need in a way they currently may not be able to. As we look to how the impacts of the pandemic have changed our community, we have an opportunity to reimagine our communities and how they intersect with each other. We talk about the impacts of the pandemic in terms of the economy and labor shortages. A responsive, integrated transit system will give people, and particularly women, who have been more deeply affected by the pandemic, an opportunity to access employment across the region, as well as other services that will improve their quality of life. We need to recognize that a high-quality, responsive transit system is a community asset and needs to be seen as such. It is critical infrastructure that has a very direct impact on the quality of life of our community members, and particularly those that are vulnerable. It needs to be seen as a crucial element of creating and maintaining healthy communities, and there is so much evidence that supports this. We've heard lots of it tonight. As a regional agency, we are constantly seeing the consequences of an inadequate system and the barriers it creates for women and families in our programs to be able to move forward with their lives. It is our hope that the City of St. Catharines will recognize the importance of moving this forward and to show leadership in their commitment to building a responsive, integrated transit system that serves the whole of Niagara. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zimmerman, for your presentation and for your thoughtful comments. Looking to see if there's any questions of the council. Not seeing any questions, and I just want to give you a special thank you for what you've done on Oakdale with the opening of the new facility there for families who are struggling through life challenges, and for also your congratulations for the award that you received recently as the Women in Business Award for your achievements. So very well done, a strong leader in our community, and I hope many are going to be listening to your voice as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And just if I can have a moment to tell a little story that I got a text from a staff member just a moment ago saying that when she left work today, there were children tobogganing down the hill from that are staying with us in this shelter. And it's one of those moments that shows the importance of access to housing and access to services. So thank you.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we now have all the delegations are complete, and I need a motion to receive the delegations. Councillor Littleton, seconded by Councillor Cisco. All in favor of the delegations? And that is carried. We now move forward with the staff recommendation. Councillor Cisco is putting the motion on the floor, and it's being seconded by Councillor Miller. So we have the motion that is in front of us. It is up on the screen and is being presented both in council chambers and on the Zoom platform. In terms of reserving the right to speak, when would you like to speak, Mr. Councillor Cisco?
I would happily speak at the beginning, Mr. Mayor.
At the beginning? Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to open with a quote, one that may not be familiar to everyone involved in this debate. The key to successful leadership is influence, not authority. Some around this council table and a small number of voices in the community are worried about losing their authority, instead of leading their communities and influencing the creation of a transit system that reflects the 21st century. In fact, the only argument I've really heard from people opposed to this integrated, consolidated regional transit plan, and there aren't many people opposed, based on the emails, the surveys, the public comments, the delegations tonight, the correspondence, definitely not among users of the system, is that they fear a loss of control. They're worried about their power over the system. So, Mr. Mayor, I was going to spend a bunch of time tonight expounding on the hard work done by regional staff to craft a plan that achieves so much support all the way across Niagara. So thank you to Matt Robinson, Heather Talbot, and Scott Fraser. I was going to talk about the amazing work that was done by former CAO Shelley Chemnitz and current CAO Dave Oakes, along with the vast majority of the other CAOs in the region, to refine the financial plan that has been created. I was going to mention the outstanding leadership from our transit staff, led by Graham Morrison and Dave Sherlock before him, along with Tim Louie as a part of the working group at the region. I was also going to detail the efforts by you, Mr. Mayor, at the region to encourage what became a 25-to-1 vote in favor of this plan, notably with unanimous agreement from St. Catharines regional councillors who all recognized the benefit to St. Catharines residents from this transit plan. I was going to give kudos to a financial plan that puts the impetus on each municipality to decide what level of local service they want and need, with the knowledge that they won't be required to subsidize someone else's local service. The financial plan also makes the governance plan work. I keep hearing about fears of local service being cut, but that's not the case because that is quite simply not how this plan works. If St. Catharines users want and need more service, representatives on the commission from other parts of Niagara have no interest in denying it. St. Catharines residents will pay for the increase in service hours. I was going to make the point that the governance plan, while not perfect in anyone's estimation, is the best possible plan that can get buy-in from the municipalities across the region. And I was also going to point out that while I have heard lots of criticism of the governance plan, this is the first time a plan like this has gotten enough buy-in across the region to get to this point. And no one has put forward a different plan that could equal that support. No one. I've heard some talk about power and control, but no better plan that achieves buy-in across the region. I was going to discuss the safeguards that are built into the system to ensure local service levels in the first 7 years are protected through the municipal transfer agreements. In fact, the new commission will have increased funding for capital replacement based on this plan, which helps to ensure sustainable service delivery in the future and is a major part of the plan. I was going to point out the wide and varied groups that were in favor of this proposal, from chambers of commerce to anti-poverty groups, Indigenous advocacy groups and friendship centers to individual business owners, 2S LGBTQIA plus groups to environmental groups to student unions to business improvement areas, and so on and so on. But they came out tonight, like they have every step of the way, to explain why this transit plan is the right next step for St. Catharines and the Niagara region. I was going to talk about, in April 2019, City Council unanimously declared a climate emergency and how failing to pursue integrated transit flies in the face of that resolution. The simple reality is that living up to our 2019 commitment and dealing effectively with this overarching challenge requires a significant change in the way decision-making takes place. We've made some strides, but much more needs to be done. I was going to mention that tonight is our chance to make decisions a different way. But instead, Mr. Mayor, I'm simply going to focus on one very important point. The people of St. Catharines deserve better than the status quo. And if you don't appreciate that, I would bet it's because you have the privilege of private car ownership. You don't have to worry about how you're getting to work. You haven't had to wonder how you're going to get to your cataract appointment with Dr. Purbai at the Welland Hospital or to the stroke center at GNGH. You aren't pondering when the next time will be when your parents from Fort Erie get to see their grandkids. And for the record, Mr. Mayor, those are real concerns of real residents in St. Catharines. You likely can't say when the last time was that you actually rode the bus. And to be clear, that's not actually a criticism. But I would hope that those who enjoy these privileges will also appreciate that they are not universal. I know some of us have been debating transit policy for longer than I have. I have heard members of this council bemoan the loss of NS&T. But it's time to recognize that the days of horse-drawn buggies and trolleys down Main Street are gone. You've got to retire the shovel now. It's 2021. It's not 1921. It's time to build for the future and stop clinging to an archaic past. Clinging to that past without an eye to the future is holding back our city and, in fact, our entire region. So I would urge all of my colleagues tonight to focus on leadership through influence, not authority, and to make the better choice for our transit users, for all of our residents, both in St. Catharines and the wider Niagara region, and vote in favor of the plan presented. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. Thank you for your leadership on this. Councillor Porter, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a hard act to follow. That was a presidential speech. So I want to thank my colleague, Councillor Cisco, for working on the Linking Niagara Transit Committee for so long, to the regional staff who are here, and to all the presenters who came out today. They made some wonderful arguments. They spoke from the heart, and I think they really represented our community and the needs that I've been hearing. I've received several emails from residents, from people who use transit, and from business owners. I saw tweets and received emails from people who used to live in St. Catharines, who were former Brock students 20 years ago, making the arguments that Brad Clark was making about transit being in need in St. Catharines 20 years ago. And that's about when I moved to St. Catharines for good. And one of the cities that I lived in before that was Halifax. And when I moved to St. Catharines, there was a remarkable difference in the city. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why St. Catharines downtown wasn't as vibrant, why I found it more difficult to kind of make friends and get around. And looking back, I believe it's because we don't have the kind of transit system that Halifax enjoys. Halifax Transit amalgamated in 1981. It amalgamated with Dartmouth. And currently, Halifax has 2 ferry lines that move 3,000 people a day. They have several routes going around the city. They have 3 regional express routes, and they have rural routes. So they service between Upper Tantalon and North Preston, which is about further from here to Wainfleet. And there's lots of service. It's a big, well-funded public transit system. And I believe that if Halifax hadn't amalgamated back then in 1981 with Dartmouth and then with Cole Harbour and all the other smaller municipalities that now forms Halifax Regional Municipality, they wouldn't have the kind of transit investments and the transit system that they have today. A big, solid ATU local in Halifax. And they're talking about adding another ferry line from Bedford which has a population of about 20,000 people, into the city of Halifax. So that's a great transit system. It's something I look at because it's a place that I lived, serviced colleges and universities. And I believe that we need to create that kind of transit system in Niagara. I've worked at jobs in the city where I've had to manage an employment program to help people on Ontario disability support get to jobs. So I visited Stanpac, a company that wrote a letter to the region and to us asking us to look at this and invest in our transit system. I visited Stanpac and many other companies. They had jobs and we had people wanting to work at those jobs, but we could not get them there. We were racking our brains. We were thinking about writing grants to come up with some kind of minivan system or to pay somebody to get these jobs. It's really important for us to look at the people who need the transit system to need to get to those jobs. And before I was a counselor, I was trying to figure this out as an employee at an employment agency working with people on ODSP. And I think now is the opportunity for us to create a better, more integrated transit system. I have the transit app on my phone. I am a transit user. About 10 years ago, we moved to become a one-car family from a two-car family. And for about 4 of those years, I worked in Welland or in Niagara Falls. And from time to time, I had to take the bus when my husband had the van or the car was in the shop. It's not always easy to navigate several different transit systems. One time I took the wrong bus. Another time I had to be in Welland on a Sunday for an event and the transit wasn't running. So I had to spend $40 on an Uber just to get to an event to be there for 3 hours. If you go to the transit app on your phone, I can only buy tickets for St. Catharines on this app. So, and I find this incredibly difficult to navigate myself. If I wanted to take my family to Niagara Falls, I would have to buy a regional transit ticket. And I believe that our residents want to have one transit app on their phone to be able to get from one place to another. And the final thing I want to say, there's been a lot of talk about the environment and affordable housing. And I believe as a region, we need to be building a better transit system and we need to integrate better planning. And we've developed and have a lot of sprawl in St. Catharines. It's not necessarily the most transit friendly place to build transit systems. So as we build an integrated transit system, we need to be thinking about affordable housing, transit-oriented development to create walkable cities where there's bike lanes, where there's transit, where people can get to those employment lands in different parts of the region to make a better system. I won't repeat a lot of what was said about poverty in Niagara. I work at an agency that works with people living in poverty, and I think that this investment is crucial. I'm proud to support what's in front of us today, and I want to thank the regional staff for the great plan and for listening to us. It's true that we all have to be transit advocates, whether it's the St. Catharines Transit, Niagara Regional Transit. We have to be demanding that our federal and provincial governments are always investing in transit, whether we live in Edmonton or Halifax or St. Catharines. This is always something that we need to fight for. And I think that we can do this together. And I do have faith that the region is going to do a good job with transit. They manage lots of other boards and agencies. And I think this is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. We go to now Councillor Sorrento, followed by Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try not to repeat what many of my colleagues and the presenters have said, sir. So I'll just say that a consolidated regional transit system is what the province has told us that is required for GO Transit improvement in Niagara. If you'll remember, Chair, I think in 2015 when this was struck, and I think when we all spoke with one voice to get GO Transit down here, I think one of the prerequisites was to have interconnectivity among the municipalities. So this goes way back to, I think, 2015, 2016, perhaps Chair Cisco or Mr. Robinson can speak to that at some point in time. So this is becoming a reality. This is going to be a historic vote. Should it be the will of council tonight, Chair, it will be a historic vote. So there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are available at the province, and Councillor Porter just mentioned that we should always be lobbying them. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars available for transit and for infrastructure, and that ask is in, Mr. Mayor. They were also speaking about housing. There were three presenters speakers that just talked about housing, and the current government has just struck a task force to address that. So I don't really want to get into that because it's about the intermunicipal transit tonight. We can't forget our dear seniors that use this. So not only is it a necessity for many, many people, including seniors, students, newcomers, to get to work, but there's also a social component to it as well, Mr. Mayor. So you might have, say, people who don't have cars, whether they're seniors, whether they're newcomers in St. Catharines, they may want to go to Niagara Falls, they may want to go to Port Colborne, and an intermunicipal transit system would allow that and to do it in a relatively cheap way. So these are just some of the points that are very, very important. And the governance, Mr. Mayor, if we look at an example, let's just say police services, okay? So it's region-wide. Police Services Board has its own members, okay? Is St. Catharines underserved? No, I would submit it's not. Could we always have more? Sure, but you know what? I don't think that once the governance committee or once the board is struck, that there are going to be people from different municipalities, Mayor Sinzik, they're going to say, well, let's stick it to St. Catharines. You know what? Big St. Catharines has all the buses. They have the majority of the money. They have the ridership. I don't think that's going to happen. I think at some point in time, Mr. Mayor, we have to put our trust in the people. We have elected officials at the region, Mayor Sinzik, and we have to put a trust and belief in the people that they are going to make a decision. The board members are going to make the decision for the greater good of the Niagara region. And I just want to go back to Mr. Radcliffe's point that he said, and forgive me, I'm sorry for butchering your name, Caleb. I apologize. I don't have it in front of me. However, I think he's right, Mr. Mayor. I don't think we're going to see, maybe we might see some immediate benefits, but I think, you know, decades down the road with this interconnectivity, should it be the will of this council to pass this historic vote tonight, Mr. Mayor, I think it will really be a great decision. So I'm just very happy to support this. I'm definitely voting in favor of it. I'll definitely be trying to solicit funds for it. I don't know if we can get them. And hats off to you, Mr. Mayor, to Chair Cisco, I know, and Councillor Miller, and everybody who was involved in this, past and previous, Mr. Mayor. I know you had no less than 16 meetings. I know they're long meetings, they're intense. I know you spoke with a lot of the stakeholders in the community, with the unions, all the different transit. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to make the right decision, and it's going to be a win-win for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm definitely voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Williamson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is abundantly evident we need a regional transit system. The question is how we do it and how we safeguard our city's voice in that system, how we safeguard cost to our taxpayers and do it in a way that's fair for local citizens. I sat on the commission in the 90s during the Mike Harris years when we were fighting against amalgamation. That's more at the municipal level than at the transit level, but funding was cut and it was tough going. So I have some roots and I have children who take the bus, so I'm familiar with what happens around here. I care deeply about public transit, and I strongly believe our focus ought to be on improving and protecting our transit service, both in our municipality, locally where we're elected and have a mandate to serve, and secondarily to the Niagara region, since we need a holistic transportation system, and transportation systems don't end at political boundaries. I think we all acknowledge that. The comparable municipality which has demonstrably been the most successful in improving public transit leading up to COVID in Ontario has been Kingston. It was acknowledged as such through media, including in Municipal World. It's got the highest proportion of commuters using active transportation and public transit of all mid-sized Canadian metropolitan areas. From 2011 to 2017, the city increased its transit ridership by 73%, with over 6 million riders in 2017. How did they do it? They spent money. If you want quality transit, you have to be willing to invest in it. They did it through investing in an ambitious commitment to expand and phase in express routes, better overall service, expanded service, and they tied it in with their transportation master plan, like the one that we recently passed. I do fear that with a loss of influence in this, we will not be able to necessarily do the things we would like to do with the transportation master plan. So it's an important choice we're making tonight, and the decision that's being recommended would cede influence, our influence over the largest and most effective public transportation system in Niagara, the St. Catharines Transit Commission, and it would turn it over to mainly, and this, I'm just speaking real politics here, to rural and small town politicians who make up the majority in the unfair system of representation we are saddled with in the Niagara region. Remember, we have 6 seats of 32 in Niagara Regional Council, and it comes nowhere close to representing representation by population, which is a fundamental democratic concept. The governance model proposed gives St. Catharines even less of a say, with only 3 of the 15 votes on this large board or large commission. The 3 primary transit operators, the largest municipalities, Niagara Falls, Welland, and St. Catharines, have worked cooperatively and have already offered and done a good job of offering an integrated system within the funding constraints that they experience. And together, we will only get 6 of the 15 seats. So we'll have a minority voice in this proposed model. That means that urban areas where 90% of transit services provided or delivered will be at the mercy of politicians who are outside of those areas. And it isn't fair. It's you can talk about authority or not authority, influence, whatever way you want to look at it. They're representing places that now have limited or no public transit, and we're relying on them to ante up. Transit costs a lot of money, and this is about competing interests. When push comes to shove, local politicians are going to take care of their own constituents before they're going to take care of the bigger picture. I wish that wasn't the case. That's the theory of the commons, and it's been proven time and time again, and that's why we have electoral boundaries and districts. So that's the big question. They will have not much experience, no democratic mandate or accountability to people in St. Catharines particularly, and they're going to be making the policy decisions for the largest urban area. It may well be that the St. Catharines Transit Commission will cease to exist. I understand that, but we need to retain some autonomy in the making of decisions over transit matters that affect us directly. Bus routes, frequency of service, costs of fares. We kept ours at 3, theirs at 6. I'm concerned about what will happen to transit fares and affordability. Paratransit, the local transit union raised funds for paratransit bus in the past, and we've had a great relationship with them. They have their concerns about the direction that we're going as well, or what the way this is going. This transit system was built locally, and we need to continue to have a say in how the decision making that takes place here. I don't think making a major change on a leap of faith is a reasonable proposition. I prefer that we continue to have a fair voice. I think that the integrated public transit option that the consultant put forward was a better choice. I understand that some compromises need to have been made to get regional buy-in, but I also don't think that we should be sacrificing too much in this. We still have to have a say in it, and I'm very concerned that we're not going to have a say in this model. Thank you very much. And I got to say, I do really sincerely appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and particularly by our own St. Catharines Transit Commission, Chair Colin Briggs, Henry Bosch, Dr. Chris Fullerton, from Brock University, a professor in the subject matter of urban planning and transportation, and they have expressed their concerns. I would like to see their concerns addressed in this. People have talked about climate change and environmental issues. I think that we're going to get a regional system, and it's going to help in those regards, regardless of which specific way we go. So to attribute it being the greatest thing just for that in this particular model, I don't think that's a reasonable thing to say. I think it's going to happen one way or other, and it's a really important reason why we do need to have strong public transit. I'll yield the floor, and thank you.
Mr. Mayor, point of privilege, please.
Just wait, Councillor Sorrento.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williamson. My only remark is that a leap of faith is taking a rocket ship to space. Approving regional transit just makes sense. This is not about a leap of faith. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I've done a lot of research on this. I've received a lot of emails from people who ride transit. I do want to share an email that I did receive from a constituent, and I wasn't going to read it, but I feel it's important to read. The email came from Ms. Sidorenko, who was an international student at Niagara College, and she highlights the fact that, I'll read word for word. Personally, I was shocked by the lack of public transportation and zero movement towards improving that. When I first arrived at Niagara College to study at the Niagara Wine program at Niagara College, I was under the understanding that I would be able to get to and from my co-op. I moved into my house in St. Catharines, and little did I know that I would have to cycle or walk to work in order to make sure I would get there on time, because living in St. Catharines did not allow me to get to my job at Chateau de Charme Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I'm urging all council to endorse a Niagara region-wide transit so new, young international students like myself can access our jobs throughout the community and get our co-op hours in place. Thank you. And I just, hearing that, it was highlighted as well by the GNCC and Hugo when he spoke about hospitality workers. I see it right away in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I see people who take Ubers to have to come to work in Niagara-on-the-Lake and spend $40 on a round-trip fare. I want to also highlight the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a regional transit document that highlights the important need for further public access to transportation. You look at communities and regions like Kitchener, Waterloo, and Peel and Kingston who have done it right. To suggest, I've heard my colleague tonight suggest that a regional transit commission would be only focused on rural communities outside. The goal of the regional transit commission would be to provide for the best possible transit for all of Niagara. It wouldn't be made up of individuals who would be focusing on making sure that rural communities get the best access possible. It would be about making sure that people who live in the largest communities can get from St. Catharines to Grimsby, from Grimsby to Wainfleet, from Wainfleet to Port Colborne, to Fort Erie, to Welland, to all over the Niagara region. To suggest that a commission would not actually operate in good faith to assure that people across the Niagara region would get to and from point A to point B is a little bit absurd. We declared a climate change emergency in St. Catharines. The Clean Air Alliance of Ontario suggests that public transit is the way forward. The St. Catharines Environmental Alliance has suggested that it is important to get cars off the road and get people into public transit. I figure, and my vision for the next 10 years is to see high-speed rail come to St. Catharines to connect the west of the province to the east up into Quebec, the north to the south, and the south to the north. We need high-speed rail. And I will say, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's also going to be a matter of when we do implement and create a high-speed, zero-emissions ferry service across from St. Catharines, the Niagara region, to downtown Toronto. That is only a matter of time. That will happen, and you will see that. And in order for people who come back this way, we need regionalized transit for people who will be coming to visit St. Catharines, who will be taking this ferry service to get from Port Dalhousie or wherever it may board, to get from point A to across the Niagara region, to visit the wineries, to visit downtown St. Catharines. this is a step in the right direction. I applaud the hard work that has gone into this. If we want to declare a climate emergency and we want to declare the importance of clean air and the future of climate change, this is a step in the right direction. I applaud the hard work that has been put in at the region. I applaud Councillor Matt Cisco for his hard work. This is something that should have been implemented 5 years ago or more. Let's take the right step as a council. Let's move forward. Let's progress, and let's do the right thing and vote yes today to regionalize transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. I got Councillor Kushner, and then Councillor Littleton is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share Councillor Williamson's concerns, and I would trust that they would be considered at the next stage in the process. I also had concerns. Specifically, I would have hoped that a business plan would have been provided to council. When we amalgamated our hydro utilities, we did have a business plan and we knew exactly where we were going. However, I do assume one will be forthcoming at a later stage. And I must say this evening, I found the presentations by the various groups to be very impressive and very convincing, and especially those that advocated for the lower income groups and the students. And therefore, based on those presentations this evening, I will support the staff recommendation very much so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. I will let Councillor Phillips go next, as I'm sitting in the chair right now for the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. As I come into this meeting tonight, I'll be honest, I was sitting on the fence. I wasn't sure because I was sharing a lot of Councillor Williamson's concerns about what's going to happen to St. Catharines Transit in all of this. And because of the few representatives we're going to have on the board compared to the rest of the region, in my mind, and I think in every councillor's mind, St. Catharines Transit is a wonderful transit system. We're told our ridership is as good as anybody's, and I commend former members of the commission who are sitting on council. Councillors, I know, well, Councillor Williamson mentioned he was on it many years ago. Councillor Cisco, Councillor Miller, and particularly Councillor Dodge, who has sat on the Transit Commission for many, many years, and all of you have worked hard to create what the transit system we have today. And hopefully, and I almost see this as, from what Councillor Cisco said, is a promise that it won't get any worse. It will only be improved based on the desires of the three people who are going to be on that transit commission, because we will pay for what we want. And we'll be looking at that very carefully to make sure that happens. You talked about influence, Councillor Cisco. Those people who spoke with us tonight were people of influence, and as Councillor Kushner said, very impressive. And I can tell you, I've made up my mind that I will support the staff recommendation tonight. A long time ago, a very wise old councillor told me to think with my head, not with my heart, and or vote with my head, not with my heart. And in this case, looking at everything that was presented tonight and listening to this discussion, I will support the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. And I'll go to Councillor Garcia and then Councillor Littleton for a wrap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to share with council that having spent probably the bulk of my career in business planning and development, I can particularly understand and appreciate the benefits that integrated regional transit can provide. And we live in a really widely spread out region, and providing good transit access to municipalities will clearly benefit all. We've heard from so many speakers. It would obviously benefit students, it would benefit individuals, it would benefit minorities, the indigenous community, and certainly businesses. So there's no argument that the concept is a good concept and it should be supported. So I strongly support the concept of regional transit and hope that we can implement a proper system. However, I must always remember that we, and certainly myself, are here representing the city of St. Catharines, and I feel that we must ensure that the new system is fair to our citizens. And I'm not sure, having listened to some of the other councillors, that the proposal before us is totally fair to our city. We provide the bulk of the fleet that is going to be used and the assets, and we also represent 40% of the population in the region. We use the most public transit, have the most efficient transit system, and yet we're looking at a governance model that only gives us 20% of the votes on this new commission. I feel that if we approve this tonight, we must expect that that governance system would be changed to give us a better representation, because my colleague Councilor Cisco gave a very good talk, and he mentioned the authority and influence, and I agree that influence is the key, but you also need some authority to get that influence. And if we give up all our authority, I think we could end up with a system that is not particularly beneficial to our city. It's obviously going to benefit the region as a whole. So I just wanted to share. I'm really torn about this. I'm on the fence because I was hoping that by the time we came to a vote, we had a better governance system that was fair to the city of St. Catharines and our residents. So, but I will repeat that I certainly believe in the concept, and I think we need a good integrated public system. But having said that, we need to be fair to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. And just for the public who are following along, there is a 7-year service guarantee. So the current service levels that were used in 2019, pre-COVID, are guaranteed for a 7-year timeline. We pay for the service we have here in St. Catharines. So the funds that are contributed by the people of St. Catharines stay in St. Catharines, and our assets also stay in St. Catharines. So the assets that you talked about, the buses, they stay within the St. Catharines service area as part of this overall agreement. So I just want the public to know that, and I'll go over now to Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief. I just wanted to, I wasn't going to say anything because I'm a yes. There's no questions. I've been yes all day long. I've been tweeting. And I think this is one of those issues where everybody talks about how we want to increase transit. We want to improve transit. We need better transit. And yet then we get to a decision and then we actually think about not voting to improve and increase transit. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So we heard from groups today, and we didn't hear from one group. We heard from a broad spectrum of groups, which I think really represent our community, both in St. Catharines and the broader Niagara community. And everybody is asking for us to vote yes on this. Personally, I grew up in London, rode the bus system all over London, had no problems. It was just one system. I moved to Ottawa after that, when Ottawa was still not amalgamated, and rode the system all over Ottawa. It didn't stop at Nepean. It didn't stop at Canada, Orleans, Vanier. It was one system, OC Transpo, and everybody got on it and nobody fought about anything. And now it's just one Ottawa. But these systems made it so easy for me to move to different cities, and because I was familiar with transit and I wasn't afraid of using transit in other cities, and to get around. I never worried about if I had to go. Some people know I covered the Senators when I was in university. I had to take the bus out to Canada. And guess what? There was a bus that went to Canada. And so I hopped on it and out I went. And had I not been able to do that as a student, I wouldn't have got my first reporting job as a cub reporter, as a sports reporter, different because I wouldn't have had that experience previously that I could have put on my resume. So there's a lot to be said for having transportation. And the other thing too is when you go to other cities in like Europe, for example, I've used the transit in London and Paris. They're very easy. You just hop on these transit systems. I don't rent a car when I went over to, you know, Europe. And I'm speaking I understand when I say those words, it sounds very privileged, and I'm very grateful that I had those experiences. But the fact of the matter is we talk about all these wonderful things in the Netherlands for biking, and yet we don't want to build bike infrastructure here. It's the same thing. Well, I love these subway systems here, there, and everywhere, but I'm not going to build a transit system here with buses. It just doesn't make sense. When I talk about my own children, they go to school in Welland, and fortunately, the school, if they want to play sports or something like this after school, the school actually has to hire taxis to take them back to their cities. So if my daughter's playing volleyball today, she gets the taxi back to St. Catharines. If they didn't do that, she wouldn't be able to participate in sports because there's no bus system that I'm going to let my 14-year-old daughter navigate on her own from Welland at whatever time to St. Catharines. And then the other way, my children, they go to school, French school in Welland. They want to take bilingual jobs, which are actually available in Welland, and we've told them they can't do it because there's no guarantee that they would be able to take transportation. So I understand when I'm hearing folks saying, you know what, I can't get a job, I can't get this part-time job. All the students that came and told us they can't get jobs to start paying off their student debts or to help fund their educations because they can't commit to the time it takes for them to get on a bus to get to a job. That's a problem. That is a huge problem. And we've had a lot of young voices in this area talking about the environment. I just want to say one thing about that. Earlier this summer, I have 3 children, and one of them was very upset one week, just burst into tears and was inconsolable. And we were like, what is the matter? And she was talking about the environment. This is on their minds so much. They're afraid there's actually not going to be a planet in 50 years. This is a real fear that our children have. And my daughter was terrified from all of the things that were going on just at that moment, that this was actually going to be not even 50 years, but maybe 30 years. We heard tonight, and we all know this, that greenhouse gas emissions are such a problem and are causing such an environmental disaster right now. We have an opportunity to build a transit system now that's going to move people around this region, that's going to help reduce it. As Mr. Dockstader said, less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from public transit. We need to get on the bus. So that's what I'm going to leave my comments at that, and I'm a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. And we go now to Councillor Dodge, and then rounding it up will be Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask a couple of questions now, or are we not able to ask questions?
No, questions and statements. So this is your one shot to you could do both.
Okay, perfect. When earlier the CAO had mentioned, and I just need some clarification on this. He said that in this process, we own the land but we don't own the building for our transit hub on 4th Avenue. So what does that mean? First Street. What does that mean to us as a transit? We own the land, but we don't own the building or the assets? I'm a little bit confused. I just want some clarification on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I was referencing is the transfer of the assets. So assuming that the triple majority moves forward, the assets being the fleet, the building, and all the associated pieces that move within the Transit Commission would transfer up to the region. The land that it sits on would stay as owned by the City of St. Catharines.
So how does that work? I don't understand. We keep the land, but then they take the building away? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying there.
So it's simply an accounting mechanism to transfer the assets up to the region.
So does that mean that we as a city couldn't use that asset for something that we could, like a use that would be for the municipality, other than transit?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're referencing are you referencing the building, Councillor Dodge?
Yes, of the St. Catharines use that if we don't use it for transit, we use it for another use for something that the municipality could use, like say we move Lake Street over there or something, I don't know, and anything else that we could, you know, possibly have a use for there. Does that mean that we don't get to use that building or that property if they don't use it for transit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the point of all of this is that will stay a transit use, and the assets, all of the buses would stay within St. Catharines service area. If it were determined in, you know, at some point in the long-term future, and there was no longer a need for that building for transit purposes, then the building would come back to the municipality to be used for some other purpose. But there's no intent in that. The entire financial modeling and the business plan and all of the asset through the transfer agreements and the term sheets that have been identified are specific to transferring all of the assets for transit purposes. So essentially what would happen is all of those would move to a regional commission, and they would be the responsibility of that commission. However, the service area would remain the same. So St. Catharines buses would stay in St. Catharines. The facility would continue to be the service area for that fleet, and all of the ancillary services at that property would remain. If in the future something were to change, then because the land remains with the city, it would come back to City Council to make that determination.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I just needed that clarification. And then, you know what, we had some really great presenters this evening, and a lot of them were saying about how they wanted to, you know, have the integrated system because it could get people around much easier throughout the region and whatnot. So I'm just wondering, because I'm not really sure, I think in the 2027 master plan for the region, that's when that comes into play. And we're saying that we have a 7-year service guarantee. So what type of time frame are we looking at for some of these things that people are asking for actually tonight? When are we going to see those things happening? And specifically, like, you know, when people are saying that, you know, it takes an hour to get from Niagara Falls to St. Catharines, when are we going to see a shorter time frame if this moves up to the region where maybe it isn't that isn't the case anymore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so essentially the services and the special levy that would be created is for the St. Catharines level of service. When we talk about that regional integration, the intermunicipal transit portion, that would remain on the regional levy. And the intention is, once the commission is established, the intermunicipal routes will be harmonized in a way. Number one, the rates will actually decrease. So they're currently, I believe, $6 for an intermunicipal transit fee. It would go down to the $3 because that's part of the financial plan that's been developed. So from that perspective, it would be immediate. In terms of having dedicated and new lines and routes that would no longer be transfer stations, I believe that's part of the program. But I might defer to Mr. Robinson just to speak to the specific of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, if you're available, you're up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the long-term accommodations, that looks at year 5, which is the network review. So you see the 55,000 new hours into the existing system occur over 23 and 24. And then as we get into 25 and 26, by year 5 of the upload, that's where we see the network review. That's where we see the integration of various TMP. I've heard some commentary tonight around existing municipal transportation master plans. That's where we look in year 5 at that comprehensive network review. After the 55,000 hours are established, after the combination of specialized and on-demand services occur over the first 4 years, in year 5 is where that network review occurs. That's where the view to adding bus rapid transit, adding new routes, adding new accommodations for things found in various TMPs, that's where the commission would look to add those new and expanded net new system services beyond the existing service improvements to add days and add hours, which occur within the first 2 years.
Okay. So if we were to, and I don't know who to ask this question to, but if we were to expand on the intermunicipal transit system that we're using now, would we be able to move some of those things forward quicker, or do you feel that it would be just as long a time? Because, like, when we're talking 5 years out, the people that are speaking tonight and asking for, this to change, I think that they were, like, some of them, a couple of people did, I think, understand that, things don't happen quickly. But would that be the case if we were to expand on the service that we already have and make that a better system?
I think before we go to Mr. Robinson, I would say one of the immediate things that would be a benefit for both Niagara College and Brock University is within the first year that you would have negotiations with one transit commission, not with 5 or 6. So that would be an immediate gain for 2 of the presenters that we're talking today about the length of time it does take to do the negotiation. So I'll go to Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, and through your chair. It's fair to say, Councillor, that with a single governing authority making decisions for the entirety of the region, looking at annual service reviews as it starts to implement the service plan that's clearly been identified in the proposal, they would be looking annually at opportunities to do business differently. Their mandate will be to create a better system. The service plan creates a number of opportunities to make that system better. I don't believe that the transit professionals at the helm of a new commission would wait 5 years for implementing something if they saw an opportunity to make tangible improvements early on in the process.
Okay, that didn't really answer my question. I guess, like, we did have an express system or an express system set up throughout, and this is just a comment right now, but throughout the region at one point in time, and that was something that we had that went from St. Catharines to Niagara Falls to Welland, and it was an express. You got on and you went straight to their system, and you were able to use their facilities right there, and then it wasn't like there was no stops and whatnot. And then what happened was, as it does, and I mean, we're governed by budgeting and stuff like that, it got to be too costly because there just wasn't the ridership there. And I know that times have changed and stuff like that, right? And then what happened became, we started providing the service to, like, the Niagara colleges and the Brock universities, because they were the users and they were the ones that, made it so that we could afford some of this through our budgets. And I mean, we know that there's lots of capital dollars out there. Everybody wants to throw money at transit right now, and that's for capital. But what about for operating? Like, where do we see this money coming from? Because, I mean, in order to make these things work, like Kingston right now, everybody else is saying, well, we need to cut back because we don't have, they're throwing money at their system and saying, okay, we're gonna increase our service so that we can get our ridership up, and it's working. So what are we gonna be doing? What do you see happening to make those things happen quicker for our riders here in St. Catharines and the Niagara region? I mean, I'm totally in support of an integrated system that works and stuff like that. So where do you see things like that happening for us?
So before I go to Mr. Robinson, I will be clear, when it comes to Kingston, it is a one-tier municipality. So it's servicing the entire regional geography of the Kingston area. So just want to be clear on that, because we don't want to mislead people to think that Kingston is a city unto itself and has a regional government that surrounds it. It is a one-tier. And so much like you would get with Durham region, providing transit to a number of different municipalities. So I'll go over to Mr. Robinson if you got a comment there.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I could use other examples like Burlington and Oakville, Mississauga, Brampton. They're doing similar things as well. So I'm sorry that I used Kingston. It was just that was kind of at the forefront right now that I've heard about recently. So.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, were you looking for a comment from me as well on that?
I think like there's, I don't know, it's up to you.
What I can say, I guess, to the councillor is the service plan and the financial plan have been intricately linked. So the service that's laid out in consultation with municipalities, using Tim Louie from the St. Catharines Transit Commission to help build that service plan, engaging with the local transit general managers from the 3 large properties to develop that service plan, they dictated what key components of service expansion were needed to ground the new commission in the early years. We subsequently then recalibrated the financial plan to allow for the funds to be able to do that. And it allows for, specifically, the new introduction of a capital reserve, which allows for more funding, self-funding, because something we heard from many in southern Niagara was volatility of upper orders of government and being able to fund going forward. And how do we mitigate that? And that's what that capital reserve is intended to do, is to allow for the commission the resources to grow and meet demand, which is why the 2020 budget, the last pre-COVID budget, is the starting point for the new commission. It will allow the new commission to be able to get up off its feet and grow the system as Niagara recovers from COVID, as the ridership demands and starts to grow. The resources will be there to allow the commission to successfully grow the system, meet the demand, and increase services. It also allows for us to mitigate any volatility going forward in whatever upper orders of government may do with their funding streams in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I guess I have other questions, but I'm not going to keep going into it. And I just wanted to say thank you to our Transit Commission, our council, yourself for the work that you've done, and to the CAO, everyone that's brought it to this. I can tell you that I'm very supportive of intermunicipal transit. I know there's a need out there. I've sat on transit for a long time, and we've made great strides in, working on a very tight budget and, providing the best service that we could for not only our residents, but for the Niagara residents, the Brock students, the Niagara College students, anyone that, did come out to us and stuff like that. But my commission didn't support this unanimously, and I have to stand behind them. There's a lot of questions, I think, that haven't been answered, and I just don't feel comfortable right now supporting this. Although I do support the concept, I'm going to stand by that. So thank you very much for everyone that has shared their thoughts with this, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Councillor Miller?
Thanks. I'll ask a couple of questions. I'll try to keep them brief. I think mostly to our CAO, just in terms of the process, if the triple majority is going forward. There was a lot of talk in the report about personnel transfer, and I'm just wondering, basically, if you could, I guess, expound on how that's going to roll out, because St. Catharines Transit is still going to have to operate for another year. Yet presumably some of the non-union management staff are going to be moving up to the new commission. Is that, and those things are sort of happening at the same time. So how you foresee that playing out?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. You're correct. So basically what happens in 2022 is the transfer agreements, which will deal with all of these elements. The personnel and the staffing is a obvious, the most significant part of a lot of that discussion. So essentially what happens in the first quarter and second quarter of 2022 is when the negotiations on the transfer agreements will be considered. The local unions on the driver's side have all been in discussion. So there's it's just a function of merging or amalgamating how that will work out. In terms of the management staff, it's basically the same concept, where we're looking at the administration side of the operation through those transfer agreements, the discussions, the movement for a general manager, and all of those positions will move through that process. And one of the reasons why we've been engaged and talking directly through myself to the general manager, Mr. Morrison, was, and I know this has been a key concern of the Transit Commission, and it's something that we will be focusing on specifically to make sure and ensure that we deal with both the union and the non-union employees through these transfer agreements. It's it's a critical piece that we see, and that will essentially be Q2, Q3 to have that dealt with specifically.
Okay, yeah, and I would just say to try to do that as quickly as possible, because I think there's real concern. If this is moving forward, some of our senior staff might start looking for opportunities elsewhere, and we certainly don't want to lose that expertise. And I guess just to bring forward the other side, the union members' concern, could you touch on, I guess, maybe some of the discussions of the CAO and with Mr. Robinson around privatization? I know some of the operators have expressed concern about waste management moving to a private service when it was regionalized and moving out. So how the group feels about that and how we sort of ensure that doesn't happen.
Through Mr. Mayor, it's actually quite the opposite. So the consolidated transit system effectively solidifies the public aspect of transit, and the notion of having private contractors filling a gap right now is to create the demand to allow the actual system to grow on the public side. So it's a step currently to create the demand, but the intention has always been that would remain all public transit. Once the system grows and becomes more robust and moves into new areas, that service will become part of the public piece, if that's what you're referencing.
Yeah, I think that will hopefully assuage, I think, some of those fears that, and again, I think rightfully so, some of the operators have some consternation around that. I'll do my sort of pontification thing here. I think what we have to understand first and foremost is that voting yes on this tonight doesn't de facto make transit better tomorrow. That some of the, I think, cautiousness that people have around this is fairly justified. And I don't even mean just because of our collective experience of recent regional councils, but specifically because we've had a regional transit service for 10 years that I think a lot of people see as being underfunded. So there is some concern about the commitment that level of government has to transit. And I know that the primary benefits that we see, I mean, we're talking about 55,000 extra hours, which is great and wonderful. Only 3% of those are in St. Catharines for the first 5 years. So I think it is normal to have some trepidation about this and some concern. We have the best system currently, that most of the work in the first few years is bringing those municipalities up to matching our service levels, because we have had such a sort of historic commitment to transit. And I think on that, to the commission and to Councillor Dodge's point, I think the commission's done what it's supposed to do, which is stand up for the St. Catharines transit system we have. It is a system to be proud of, and certainly I just want Colin Briggs, Henry Bosch, Dave Shantz, Chris Fullerton, Laura Campbell, and Don Dodge have done a lot of work in the last year to express the concerns and bring those forward, and have led to some of the changes, along with the work at the Linking Niagara Transit Committee, to end up with the proposal we have now, which I think is a lot better than the one we had when we first started talking about this. And I certainly hope councillors have the same, certainly what I feel about, trepidation and consternation over this. It is giving up responsibility for a service that is the premier, or one of the premier services the municipalities deliver. And certainly that's a big, big decision. And I know it's one I think we're all taking seriously. And certainly I've gone back and forth on it. I think the risk that we're going to take in regionalizing is worth it. I think some of the issues that we point out around governance and control and transfer of assets, I think a lot of that is just to ensure the triple majority passes. That's a very difficult process to achieve in Niagara. I think we know that with the splits between big and small, rural and urban, and a lot of the other concerns. So I think if there are kinks, I think there's the opportunity to work them out in the coming years through the commission model. And I'll just say, I think our service is great in St. Catharines, but I think, as Ms. Braithwaite noted, the status quo even here isn't good enough, that we want to see greater investment, we want to see better connections, and we want to see more routes and more buses on the road and faster buses. Like I said, transit's one of the main services the municipalities deliver, and in the coming years, with climate change, with big planning concerns, and as we've seen with public health, it's probably one of the most important ones the municipalities deliver as well. I think we don't hear a lot from people who do ride the system. We hear from people who are advocating on behalf of people who ride the system. And I've said this to Councillor Cisco a week ago. I think that's because we know what riders want. People might not know this. I used to do customer service for Niagara Region Transit. There was a brief week in my life where everyone seemed to know that, but I did that for 4 years, and I can tell you I answered probably around 2,000 calls from riders, and not a single one was asking who was running the bus. They were asking if they can get somewhere, how do they get there, how long it takes, and how much it costs. And really, what we need to be asking ourselves is if saying yes tonight makes it more likely that we improve transit to make it more accessible, to make the route shorter, and to make it more affordable. And I think since we're saying it's going to be out of our hands, it's going to be in the Commission's hands, and ultimately the region making the budget decisions hands, I'll disagree with the mayor a bit. I think it is a bit of a leap of faith on our part to put it in someone else's hands. I think I'm choosing to be optimistic and take a big swing on this because I think we can't really wait any longer to improve public transit. So I'm going to vote yes, and certainly going to remain committed to advocating for improved transit, as I've been doing, and as I know a lot of us have been doing for a long time. Because I think, and I've said this before, I think this should be the main question that we ask people running for regional government next year is what their vision for transit, and 4 years after that as well. Because I think if, as a community, we don't elect those who will invest in transit, and we don't hold accountable those who don't support public transit, we're going to let down all those people we heard from tonight, students, newcomers, those forced to live in poverty, job seekers, marginalized people, and ultimately all Niagarans in the generations to come. So I think this is very early days in what will hopefully, and I think is likely to lead to improved transit, which is ultimately what everyone wants to see. So I'll be voting yes, and I'll be happy maybe to take a break from transit in my life for a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Miller, and again, thank you to all the councillors for their comments. Thank you to, and I'm not going to reiterate what Councillor Cisco started off with because he did an excellent job on the thank yous for all the people that have been involved. I personally just wanted to acknowledge CAO Chemnitz, who did an outstanding job working through this with CAO from Niagara Falls, Ken Todd, who were the representatives at the CAO level, as well as Mike Kirkopoulos from Lincoln, and then taking over the duties, CAO Oaks, as well as Dave Sherlock and Graham Morrison and Tim Louie and those groups. There's a lot of people. I guess why I don't see it as a leap of faith is because this is 20 years in the making. And so when you spend as much time as we've spent on the model and the report that's in front of us today, it's not really a leap of faith. I think it's a really good step towards bringing our communities together, and also finally putting the rider and the people who use transit at the front of our thinking rather than looking for control and power. And I think, Councillor Miller, you're correct. If we have to be advocates moving forward, we can't simply make this decision and then move forward without a thought towards transit and what transit looks like in the future. So I think, we're 20 years behind Kitchener-Waterloo, we're 20 years behind Durham, we're 20 years behind other communities that have had integrated transit. But I think we can catch up pretty quick because St. Catharines has, I think, one of the best models for a lower tier municipality. So if we can continue to build on St. Catharines' success in transit, I think the transition will be quick. And I believe that we've got the right people working in the right areas of transit, both locally and at the region, that I think the transition, if it does come to be with the triple majority, will lead to an even cleaner, greener Niagara. And I will go back to this. There was a climate strike over here at the library a couple years ago, and there was a lot of kids. I think there was about 2,000 people that showed up. This is why we're here today, in my opinion. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm voting in favor of it. It was for those kids. It's not about power. It's not about control. It's about what can we do for our next generation. And to pick up on Carl Dockstader and what he talked about, when we think about the Indigenous approach to life, thinking 7 generations forward, this decision, while will not materialize into immediate change over the next couple of years, in the next 7 generations, we'll be able to point to this decision and say, we did what we could for our future, and we did what we could for the environment. And this is why I hope this is going to be a strong showing of our council so that the other councils in Niagara will look to us as well as Fort Erie and Niagara Falls as leaders when it comes to the environment, when it comes to social equity, when it comes to economic sustainability, and all the things that make Niagara and St. Catharines an amazing place to live and work. And we're going to continue all that work moving forward. So with that, I'm going to look to the clerk, and I'm going to ask to call a question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Oh, no.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Sendzik.
A historic yes.
Carried.
Thank you very much, Council. This was a great decision, and I want to thank Regional Councillor Timms, who is joining us here today, Rigby, and former mayor. And I'm just going to acknowledge the fact that under his leadership as well, transit was on the agenda, and so it goes back many, many years, and it's great to see you here, and I do appreciate it, Tim. 23 years. Okay, so our motion of the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at a special meeting held on the 8th day of December, this historic day of December 21st, 2021, and one reading with respect to the confirming of proceedings. Can I have a motion? And I'll go to Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Kushner. All in favor of the bylaw? Any opposed? One opposed? That is carried. This is great. So an adjournment, motion to adjourn. Councillor Porter, Councillor Harris. Take care, folks. This was a great evening. Looking forward to it. This is well done all around.
History, Mr. Mayor, history. Well done, sir. And our colleagues.